Chapter 204. With Mr. Mo personally making an appearance, the T-City police did not dare to be negligent. Those who should have been arrested were all caught, and those who should have been dealt with did not live to see the sunrise today. Hearing this, Jinwan subconsciously glanced at Feng Ling. Although Feng Ling did not say much, her meaning was clear. The person who almost tainted her last night was most likely dead. Did I kill him? When Jinwan asked this, her tone was calmer than she had imagined. After all, she remembered how many times she had stabbed that person last night. No, the wounds you stabbed him yesterday were not fatal. At most, he lost too much blood. The real cause of death was because he resisted too much when he was being arrested, causing the police to accidentally injure him. Feng Ling mildly curved her lips at Jinwan, indicating for her not to think too much. How could a person who was already half dead have the strength to resist in front of the police? However, even if Jinwan had the answer in her heart, she did not say much. Some people deserve to die. Since things had already reached this stage, she did not have the heart to feel pity for the state of the universe. Feng Ling used this method to stop her from thinking too much, and Jinwan accepted this ending. It was better than letting her know that the disgusting person was still alive and making her unable to eat every day. Seeing that Jinwan did not say more, Mo Jingshan sat on the sofa and indicated for her to come over. Does her head still hurt? As she approached, the man's hand touched her head. Although he avoided her wound, he purposely touched other parts of her head, as though to make sure she did not have any other injuries. It doesn't hurt. Last night, when I was struggling, I was thrown against the wall and hit my head. Jinwan pulled his hand down from her head and said, I know you're afraid I'll have a concussion. Last night, I did feel a little dizzy, but I'm much better now. Don't worry about me. I'm really fine. She had already calmed down and needed to think about many things. Recently, no matter if it was her injuries or the various situations, they all seemed to be related to someone in Los Angeles. When Jinwan's hand was held by Mo Jingshan, she suddenly asked, That's Su Shui. What exactly is her background? Is her goal to destroy me? Or does she have other plans? Knowing that Mo Jingshan was by her side, Jinwan turned her eyes to Feng Ling and stared into her eyes. I sent her photo to you before the accident. Have you checked it? Any results? Feng Ling's expression faltered. Her gaze paused on Jinwan's face for a moment. She was about to speak when she suddenly felt Mo Jingshan's grip on her hand tighten. There's nothing for you to do here. Go out first, Mo Jingshan calmly said. His words were directed at Feng Ling. Seeing Feng Ling turn to leave, Jinwan subconsciously tried to withdraw her hand from Mo Jingshan's, only to be held tightly by him. What do you want to ask? He looked at her, his eyes clear and calm. Jinwan looked at him and suddenly felt a strong urge to pull her hand out of his. But Mo Jingshan didn't let go and looked at her fixedly. Let go of me first. She frowned and tried to pull her hand out of his palm several times. I won't. Jinwan was exasperated. She wanted to be angry, but it wasn't the right time. She could only grit her teeth and ask, Is Su Shui the fiancé you had in America? Mo Jingshan stared at the woman who was sitting on the sofa with him. Her slightly pale face was clearly suppressing her emotions. There was even a piece of gauze stuck on the wound on her forehead. Under the light from the window, she appeared frail and weak, but she still had the stubbornness of trying to maintain her rationality. No, he answered. No. Jinwan's expression was surprised. Then why did she target me? Could it be that everything that happened before and after was just a coincidence? Su Shui came from Los Angeles. There shouldn't be any mistake about this. If she isn't your fiancé, who else could she be? It can't be that a woman who appeared out of nowhere is a lunatic who finds me an eyesore and wants to harm me, right? She must have a motive for everything she did. After being reborn, Jinwan was too good at enduring. After enduring for so long, she really couldn't take it anymore. After what happened last night, who could endure it? She stared at the handsome face in front of her and closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and tried to pull her hand out again, but she still failed. I don't have a so-called fiancé. At least for now. I only have you. Mrs. Mo Jingshan didn't allow her to pull her hand away. Just like that, they held hands and looked into her eyes. Things in America can't be explained in a few words, but you have to believe that from the beginning to the end, I only have you, Jean Wan, as my woman. Although my past can't be considered a blank piece of paper, no woman has ever left a mark on it that shouldn't have. I'm your husband. I am now, will be, and will always be. Jean Wan's expression still didn't soften. I'm not a domineering and unreasonable woman. I don't even care about your past and your past. I'm very realistic, so I only look at the present and what's in front of me. But the person who I've always ignored and didn't even consider deeply has challenged my bottom line again and again. She keeps trying to find a sense of existence in me. I can't tolerate it. I know. Mo Jingshin held her hand. I'll deal with it. How to deal with it? Up until now, she didn't even know who the person hiding in the dark was. Jean Wan took a deep breath, suppressed her emotions, and said coldly in a low voice, I have a headache. I'm going back to my room to sleep. With that, she suddenly stood up from the sofa and forcefully pulled her hand out of his grasp. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the direction of the bedroom without looking back. Mo Jingshan could see that she was really angry. She was just restraining herself and did not explode. However, it was clear that she wanted to be alone and did not want to talk to him. She did not want to talk to him at all. Jean Wan directly entered the bedroom and slammed the door shut with a pong sound. She recalled the blood-stained wedding dress doll from last time and the thrilling events from last night. She wished she could dig 3 feet into the ground to find the woman hiding in the dark. Did she want to steal my man? Come on, if you have the ability, just fight me face to face. What's the purpose of hiding in the back and messing around? To drive a wedge between us? Or to make her restless? To do these things again and again to challenge her bottom line? Did he think she would be afraid? She knew she should be more rational now. She couldn't push Mo Jingshan away at this time. Otherwise, as Xia Tian had warned her, this piece of meat would be taken away without her knowing. But right now, she was really angry. Chapter 205. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. Jean Wan did not reply. She sat on the bed, holding her breath as she thought to herself, forget it, forget it. This piece of meat was covered in gold. It was too precious and hard to guard. Whoever wanted to take it away could do so. She didn't want it anymore, all right? The door was knocked several more times. After a few seconds of silence, the man's calm voice rang out. Wan Wan. Jean Wan laid on the bed, covering her face with a blanket. She was unwilling to hear his voice. Mo Jingshan knew that she had locked the door from the inside. His hand futilely twisted the doorknob. He softly said, Wan Wan, open the door. Jean Wan did not make a sound. She buried herself in the blanket and used a silent method to respond. This woman's temper came as she pleased. There was no way Mo Jingshan would allow her to lock herself in a room like this. His tone became much harsher. Jean Wan, open the door. Hearing his heavy tone, Jean Wan abruptly sat up from the bed. She resisted the urge to throw the pillow against the door. I'm not opening it. My head hurts. I want to be alone. If you have a headache, go to the hospital. Why did you lock yourself up? Open the door. The man's voice was low and heavy. His tone was clearly colder. I'm not opening it. I'm not going anywhere. I want to sleep. Jean Wan. Mo Jingshan, I don't want to talk to you right now. Do you want to open the door yourself? Or do I have to open it? Jean Wan remembered that last night in the bar's basement, he had kicked open the sturdy door. He had many ways to open the door. She was indeed unable to stop him. She hugged the blanket and laid on the bed, unmoving. She decided not to speak. Let him do as he pleased. After all, he was the one who bought this condominium. If he wanted to kick it, he could. After a moment of silence, Jean Wan suddenly remembered that since he was the one who bought this condominium, he most likely had the keys to every room in this condominium. Thinking of this, she abruptly sat up and ran off the bed. She rummaged through the table and drawers by the bed and finally found the bedroom key in the drawer at the bottom of the bedside table. Seeing that the key was not in his hands, Jean Wan finally relaxed. She placed the key back into the drawer and returned to the bed to continue covering herself with the blanket. Originally, she was just acting in a fit of pique, but after a while, she fell asleep under the quilt. When she woke up again, it was already evening. The sunset hung in the distant sky, and the room was a little dark. She got up and glanced at the door that was still closed. Mo Jingshin actually did not come in. Moreover, there was no sound outside at all. Did he go out? Or did he simply fly back to High City out of anger after being ignored by her? She slept for a few hours, and in these few hours, anything was possible. Jinwon sat on the bed for a while and listened carefully for any movements outside. There really was no sound. She abruptly lifted the covers and got off the bed. She walked to the door and pressed her ear against it to listen again. The entire apartment was so quiet that it was as if she was the only one there. Jinwon opened the locked bedroom door. She slowly opened a gap and saw something on the ground in front of the door. She paused and couldn't see clearly, so she opened the door further. Just at the moment when the bedroom door was completely opened, as if everything had its own switch, the dim room in the evening suddenly lit up, especially the light in the living room, which set off the roses on the floor, particularly eye-catching. A large area in the middle of the living room was filled with roses, and the heart-shaped flower path in the middle was even more unique. Even in this heart-shaped flower path, there were even 21 cakes. The first cake was white, representing the pure white and flawless angel when she was 1 year old. Then the color of the cakes gradually deepened from white to pink to red, until the last, the 21st cake, was red, representing marriage. Jinwon stood stiffly in front of the door, so busy throwing a tantrum that she even forgot that today was her birthday. Moreover, it had been too long since she had a birthday, and this kind of birthday atmosphere was particularly strange to her. The whole room could only see the rose path and the huge heart-shaped cakes. She raised her eyes and looked around, but did not see Mo Jingshin. She walked out of the door. As soon as she passed the first white cake, she suddenly saw a burst of bright fireworks in the sky outside the window. Jinwon stared blankly out of the window and took another step forward uncontrollably. When she passed the second cake, there was another burst of fireworks outside the window. She looked out of the window as she walked until the last cake. Because it was heart-shaped, she walked back to the starting point at the bottom of the heart-shaped cake. As soon as she stepped on the last red cake, there were no more fireworks outside the window. Instead, on the balcony outside the French windows, a light slowly lit up. A man in a white shirt stood there. There was a fire in his hands and fireworks that had not yet been set off by his feet. Jinwon was stunned, subconsciously rushed over, and opened the French windows. "Looking for me?" Mo Jingshin glanced at her with a calm smile, and the torch in his hand lit the unlit fireworks. Even when the bright and beautiful fireworks exploded in front of her, Jinwon was still looking at the man standing in the fireworks. She stood there unmoving. It was as though the entire T-City was about to be shaken by this sudden rain of fireworks. Meanwhile, the person whose birthday was actually being celebrated stood there like a fool, staring blankly. She did not even know when Mo Jingshin walked over. She only knew that the man held her hand and planted a light kiss on it, saying softly, "1-year-old Jinwon, happy birthday." Before Jinwon could react, the man had already hugged her and planted a kiss on her forehead. 2-year-old Jinwon, happy birthday. Jinwon, 3-year-old Jinwon, happy birthday. 4-year-old Jinwon, happy birthday. He kissed her hands, her face, her nose, the space between her eyebrows, her forehead, her ears, her cheeks, and so on. 20-year-old Jinwon, happy birthday. When she was about to say 21 years old, the man finally planted a kiss on her lips. He did not move away but pressed his lips against hers, saying softly, 21-year-old Mrs. Mo, happy birthday. With that, he abruptly pushed Jinwon, who was still absent-minded, against the glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. This kiss was not as light as the previous ones. Instead, it seemed to be full of possessiveness and aggression, imprisoning her firmly between the window and his chest. The kiss became deeper and deeper. When Jinwon came back to herself, she raised her hand to block his chest, but he held her back, and his tongue, which had already invaded her body, drilled deeper into her body. Jinwon could not push him away. She opened her eyes and abruptly bit down on his lips. Although it was not a heavy bite, The man paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. Jinwan wanted to say that she was still angry, but she could not say it. Chapter 206. However, the man in front of her stared at her. His deep, black eyes were filled with traces of a smile. His smile was seductive, as though he was a pervert who brought disaster to the world. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he leaned down to press his lips against hers. There was no further entanglement. Instead, he licked her lips inch by inch, filling the air with ambiguity. Finally releasing her lips, he held her waist, preventing her from turning her head away. He said in a low and hoarse voice, "Even if I'm angry, my birthday still has to be celebrated. If I don't give you a proper explanation before midnight, won't I have another baseless accusation?" Jinwan looked at his innocent appearance and pushed him angrily. "I'm not that unreasonable." "That's right. You're very reasonable. Yesterday, you acted as a hero saving a damsel in distress. Today, you dare to lock me outside the door, and that's because you weren't honest with me." Jinwan forcefully slapped his hand away from her face. Although she was clearly moved, she still had to hold back her anger. Right now, her expression was indescribable. It was likely that it was slightly twisted, but she could not be bothered to hide it. However, she was no match for his strength. Jinwan had already been brought into the floor-to-ceiling window. The window was not closed. She tried to push his hand away, but the man placed a knife in her hand. "Jinwan, cut the cake, or just cut me. Choose one." Mo Jingshin's tone was mild, but his gaze was indifferent as he watched her. It was clear that he had already seen through her thoughts. "Aren't you still angry? What do you want to cut?" He leaned over, leaning in front of her face to look at her expression. "The door is already closed, and you've held back your anger for too long. Rather than having a cold war by yourself, why don't you cut me a few times? I saw that you cut me very cleanly last night. Do you want to continue venting your anger today?" Jinwan gripped the knife tightly, glaring at him. The feeling of punching cotton was truly an internal injury. "Who says I want to have a cold war with you? I'm not that bored." Jinwan abruptly turned around, picked up a cake on the ground, and cut it. She then picked up the cake and put on the table by the side. After cutting it several times, she picked up another one and continued to cut it. From beginning to end, she did not look up at her again. Mo Jingshin stood by the side, watching her. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that she was using the same strength she used to cut the cake. The pong-pong sounds indicated that she was indeed in a bad mood. He didn't say anything and handed her the cake for her to cut. After cutting one, he passed her another. After cutting for a long time, Jinwan was tired. She turned to see that there were still a few intact ones on the ground. Mo Jingshin picked up another one and handed it to her. She stood there with the knife covered in cream in her hand. The man looked at her with clear eyes, and his eyes were filled with the indulgence that belonged to her. For a moment, Jinwan didn't know what she was angry about. He had clearly explained to her that even if his past couldn't be considered a blank piece of paper, no woman had ever left a mark on it that shouldn't have. His words were already clear enough. What else did she want him to say? Jinwan didn't know why she was so angry with him. Was it because his past in Los Angeles had been provoking her? Did this mean that the other party had succeeded in provoking her? She suddenly rubbed between her brows. She didn't think whether her jealousy was really unreasonable. She threw the knife away and went to the bathroom to wash her hands, washing away the cream on her hands. At this moment, the doorbell rang. Jinwan slowly washed her hands and saw Mo Jingshin open the door. Nan Hung came in. Seeing the mess on the floor and Mo Jingshin's white shirt more or less stained with cream, he sneered coldly. "Did you guys just go through a cream war? Or did you just unlock some new postures on so many cakes?" Jinwan didn't have time to think about why Nan Hung suddenly came to T-City. His words made her ears burn. Mo Jingshin calmly glanced at Nan Hung and then at Jinwan, who was still standing in the bathroom washing her hands. He spoke, his voice gentle and ordinary. "Your body is covered in cream. Go back to the bedroom and change your clothes after washing." Nan Hung looked at the gauze on Jinwan's head and the slightly swollen side of her face. His gaze was no longer as ordinary. "You were so heavy-handed. Didn't you crush that bastard's family jewels on the spot?" Nan Hung sneered, but his expression was clearly much colder. Jin Wan paused and calmly glanced at him. Could it be that Nan Hung was here because of the underground bar incident? Or was it related to that person in America? Before I could make a move, that person was already crippled by Feng Ling, and Mo Jingshan's extremely cold voice interrupted Jin Wan's thoughts. He looked at her. Go back to the room and change your clothes. That person was not only crippled by Feng Ling, but Jin Wan also almost killed him with her own hands. Wasn't that even more bloody? Jin Wan knew that Nan Hung was in the arms business, and she also knew that his relationship with both the underworld and the underworld was not simple. The reason why Nan Hung came here was most likely because the people who were dealt with last night were all from T-City's underground bar. Perhaps there was some connection between them. Jin Wan did not wish to hear any more about those people from last night. She glanced at them, wiped her hands, and went back to the bedroom. Seeing Jin Wan step into the bedroom with the cake and mess on the floor, Nan Hung felt that Jin Wan seemed to be angry today. Although she didn't say it, when she closed the bedroom door, she made a loud noise. Nan Hung raised his brows, looking at Mo Jingshan with an indifferent expression. What's the matter? Did you manage to save her and release her temper? Mo Jingshan ignored him. He casually unbuttoned his shirt and calmly asked, What happened in Los Angeles? What happened? Isn't it obvious? Because of your pressure, Elder Su locked his precious granddaughter up at home. Su Shui was merely used by that person. She dared to come to the country to cause trouble. She is indeed courageous. But it's not like you don't know what kind of power the Su family is relying on. Nan Hung spread his hands. But speaking of which, are you really willing to do it? That person guarded you for an entire year while you were still recovering from your injuries. There seemed to be an undercurrent surging in the air. Mo Jingshan's usually gentle face revealed a biting sharpness. His tone was cold and heavy. If it wasn't for my father's interference back then, taking advantage of the time when I was unconscious to plant such a person by my side, I wouldn't have mistaken her for my savior. Otherwise, why do you think she had the opportunity to guard me for an entire year? Chapter 207. When Nan Hung arrived, it was already evening. When Jin Wan came out of the room, she saw that Nan Hung had yet to leave. Thus, she casually asked Nan Hung if he wanted to stay for dinner. In the end, this great sir actually agreed. At that time, Jin Wan glanced at the unclean cake on the floor and the mess. She wondered if there was no need for her to be so polite to Mo Jingshan's two brothers. That night, Nan Hung looked at the takeout on the table, his lips twitching. So, the last time you went to Old Sheen's place, you personally made a sumptuous meal, and now that you're here, you can only eat takeout? Mo Jingshan tossed the disposable chopsticks to him, indifferently saying, Do I look like I have the leisure to make you a sumptuous meal right now? Nan Hung raised his brows, turning his gaze to the Ji Nuan who had now become a good wife. Jin Wan pushed her long hair to the side, showing him the gauze on her forehead. She used a casual tone, like Mo Jingshan's, to say, Do I look like I have the ability to make you a sumptuous meal right now? Nan Hung snorted, breaking the disposable chopsticks with a pa sound. He did not waste any words and directly tasted the food, raising his brows. Fine, it's my fault for not coming at the right time and place. Thankfully, this hotel's chef skills are not bad. It's barely edible. This was T-City's most famous hotel. It was said that the dishes were famous in the country. Yet, at Nan Hang's place, it was barely edible. Jinwan also picked up her chopsticks. After taking a bite, she felt that this man was the one who said one thing, but meant another. It was clearly so delicious. She had just sat down when she saw that Mo Jingshan had also come over. She paused and subconsciously began to add food to Nan Hang's bowl. Come, eat more. She kept piling food into Nan Hang's bowl. Nan Hung watched speechlessly as the food gradually piled up into a small mountain, suspecting that something was wrong with Jin Wan's brain. Her man was just sitting by the side. Why was she adding food to his bowl? Was she purposely trying to disgust her man? Nan Hung picked up the bowl that was piled high and glanced meaningfully at Mo Jingshan. Sure enough, he saw Mo Jingshan sitting there with an indifferent expression, as though he couldn't wait for him to finish eating and leave. Last time on your birthday, I cut your cake and ate so much. Today is my birthday, so I should return the favor. You can cut whatever you like. Jinwan put the knife in front of Nan Heng and piled the only 4 cakes that survived out of the 21 on the table. Although it was a gradient, the last few cakes were pink to red, and they were all very bright colors. Nan Heng took a look at Jinwan, picked up the knife with a faint smile, and casually pointed at the 4 cakes. Finally, he looked at the last big red cake and the pair of dolls in wedding suits made of black, white, and red chocolate. He picked up the knife and was about to cut it from the middle. Try cutting it. Mo Jingshan's tone did not change. When he spoke, his expression was indifferent as he coldly stared at Nan Heng. Nan Heng raised his brows and sneered. Jinwan said I can cut it as I please. Mo Jingshan's gaze casually shifted to the other 3 cakes, meaning that if he wanted to cut it, he would cut the other 3. If he dared to cut this cake with dolls, he would definitely not live to see the sun tomorrow morning. Nan Heng sneered and put down the knife. Fine, I'm not the birthday boy. Besides, I'm really not interested in things like cakes. Oh, Jinwan indifferently responded. What a coincidence. I'm also not interested in cakes recently. Nan Heng smiled mockingly. If you really don't want to eat it, I'll throw it away for you when I leave. Before he finished speaking, Mo Jingshan directly picked up the mouth of fish from the takeaway box and threw it into his bowl, saying coldly, "Eat." Nan Heng looked at the fingernail-sized fish mouth in his bowl. Did he want him to shut up? He suppressed his laughter. Your woman doesn't plan to eat this cake at all. It's clear that the 2 of us are not interested in sweets. If you don't throw this cake away, are you going to keep it at home and seal it as a fossil? Mo Jingshan raised his eyes and said coldly and indifferently, Do you have a problem with me keeping it as a fossil? Don't care about him. Eat more. Jinwan suddenly picked up all kinds of delicious food and put it into Nan Heng's bowl. She raised her voice and interrupted. What else do you like to eat? I'll help you pick it up. Nan Heng looked at Jinwan's expression with a forced smile and did not say more. Even though he did not usually like to eat meat, he still gave her face and ate some of the food in his bowl. He gave Jinwan another look. It went without saying that she dared to throw a tantrum with Mo Jingshan, but he did not have the ability to pick a fight with Mo Jingshan here. It was possible for him to cooperate with her and make things difficult for Mo Jingshan. The result was that Nan Heng was chased out before he could finish his bowl of rice that was piled up like a mountain. Before he could eat his fill, he was almost disemboweled by Mo Jingshan's cold dagger. As if this was not enough, he even had to clean up the unfinished takeout box. In the end, Mo Jingshan even added a cold word, scram. TSK. He finally understood what Qin's sighting meant when he said they were going to torture him to the point of Stockholm Syndrome. It was indeed quite F***ing inhumane. Tomorrow was Monday. Logically speaking, Jinwan should return to T University to continue her classes. However, Mo Jingshan did not seem to have any intention of returning to High City. It was likely that she would be resting in the condo tomorrow. Jinwan sat on the bed in the bedroom, holding a business management textbook in her hands. She planned to roughly read through the contents of Professor Lin's lecture tomorrow. The spacious bed was soft, and the temperature in the room was adjusted. Although T City hadn't entered winter yet, there was the sound of wind blowing tonight. Compared to the sound of the wind outside the window, this moment of silence actually gave one a sense of tranquility and security. Whether the true sense of security came from the warmth of this room or from the man living in this condo with her, she could not be bothered to think about it. The man pushed the door open and entered, breaking the silence in the room. His long legs took steady steps as he walked toward her without saying a word. The woman who was reading on the bed raised her head. Her expression was calm, and the unhappiness from before was gone. Her voice was light and emotionless. I'm returning to T University to attend classes tomorrow. The man furrowed his brows, coldly replying, No. Chapter 208. Although Jinwan's voice was calm, it clearly hid a hint of toughness. After she finished speaking, she lowered her head and continued flipping through the book. After turning a page, she said in a normal tone, "Then, let's book a plane ticket back to High City. I'll go back with you. I'm not going to study anymore. After I recover, I'll stay behind you and be an idle rich wife. Anyway, you don't lack money. Even if I casually take out a few hundred million or even a few billion to blindly invest and lose a few hundred million every day, you can still afford to squander like this. If you really want to lose, go ahead. I can indeed afford to raise you." Mo Jingshun did not mind at all the sarcasm in her words. Instead, her fists landed on cotton, causing her to feel strangely irritated. "Oh!" Jinwan forcefully squeezed out a cold word from her mouth. Mo Jingshun lowered his eyes to look at the side of her face that was still slightly red and swollen. Although it had mostly subsided, it would still take at least a day for it to completely disappear. He took the book from her hands. When Jinwan raised her eyes to look at him, he said, "Be good. Don't be angry. If your face is not swollen tomorrow morning, I'll let you return it to university." As he spoke, the man's hand caressed her face. Looking at the red and swollen side, his eyes clearly flashed with coldness. Jinwan turned her face away to avoid his touch. She lifted the blanket to cover her legs and moved to lie down. "Then I'm going to sleep. More rest will help reduce the swelling." However, before she could lie down, the man abruptly pulled her out of the bed. Jinwan had just struggled when she was pulled into his arms by the bedside. "What do you want to hear?" He held her and did not let her move away. When Jinwan raised her eyes to glare at him, his dark eyes watched her. "About everything that happened to me in America? Or about that so-called fiancé you've heard of in Los Angeles? Do you think I'm not honest enough with you? Or did I say something that touched your bottom line and angered you to this extent?" Jinwan felt that she did not have the right to ask Mo Jingshun to be completely honest with her. Besides, those were indeed things that happened before their marriage. She was well aware of how he treated her. In the past, she had sworn that no matter how many women Mo Jingshun had, in her eyes, they were all failures. But when she really wanted to understand, she found that she was actually a ridiculously narrow-minded woman. He said that no woman had left a mark on his piece of white paper. Whether there was a mark or not was secondary. The key was that such a woman did exist in Los Angeles. Jinwan was very clear about Mo Jingshun's attitude, so it was meaningless for her to haggle over this. Did she leave a mark on his paper? Or was it just that she was his wife in this marriage? His love and pampering for her seemed to have coexisted from the first day of their marriage. Everything seemed to be so natural. What about the marks? Did she stay? Mo Jingshun often looked gentle, but Jinwan knew very well that he was cold-hearted to those who had nothing to do with him. No one could easily influence any of his decisions and choices, whether it was his enemies in the business world or the women who tried to approach him. Anyone who tried to do anything to him was like hitting a stone with an egg. Jinwan felt that she had been so sheltered under his wings that she couldn't tell the direction. She was indeed under his wings, but how far was this position from his heart? In fact, it was good for her to keep calm and look at things from the perspective of a bystander. Otherwise, once he got serious, it would be the most terrible. Seeing that she didn't speak for a long time, but her eyes suddenly seemed to inadvertently glance at his chest, where his heart was. Mo Jingshun pinched her chin hard, reminding her to come back to herself. "Jinwan, speak." Jinwan came back to herself, raised her eyes, and saw that the man was patiently gazing into her eyes. "How can I not be angry?" he coaxed in a low voice. Jinwan was also wondering why she was angry. Originally, she should have asked him why he got engaged to that woman in America, why he left America, and why he married her not long after returning to High City. But when the words were on the tip of her tongue, they became, "If I didn't ask you to return to the U Garden a few months ago, if I didn't say I wanted to live a good life with you, if I didn't continue to make trouble every day for the sake of divorce, and if I really listened to Mengran's advice to commit suicide at home, if it really came to that, you would agree to divorce me, right?" Hearing her so-called assumption, Mo Jingshun's eyes instantly turned as dark as ink, and his gaze became much colder. "Once you return to America after the divorce, you'll definitely have women like in Shuyin and Ji Mingran by your side, not to mention your ex-fiancée in Los Angeles. I'm saying if you don't have me, Who will you choose to spend the rest of your life with? Although she knew that once she said these words, Mo Jingshen would definitely feel that there was a big problem, but she still asked him. America. These two words had always tugged at the most sensitive nerves of her two lives. She did not want to touch it, but she could not hold it in. The man's gaze was dark as he watched her. It was like the deep sea that had been splashed with ink, boundless and filled with the freshness of the sea breeze. He suddenly let go of her arm, releasing her from his embrace. Jinwan had yet to react when Mo Jingshen had already placed her on the bed. He expressionlessly stood up, speaking mildly. I'll go get an ice pack. Apply more cold compress on your face tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll ask Feng Ling to accompany you to T University. After speaking, the man turned and left the bedroom. Jinwan was stunned. What did this mean? She sat on the bed and thought for a moment before realizing that he seemed angry. Wasn't she the one who was originally angry? Why did it suddenly turn to him? For some reason, Jinwan's heart suddenly felt a little flustered. She had been by Mo Jingshen's side for so long. Outside of work, although he was still cold and indifferent, in general, he was exceptionally gentle and indulgent toward her. He could be described as absolutely easy to get along with. Occasionally, he would be stern toward her, but it would always be a light warning. He would always give in to her. Unlike how he treated other people, Mo Jingshen would never say a single harsh word to her. Mo Jingshen had never been truly angry toward her. Today was the first time. She was not even sure if her earlier assumption had caused him to sense something or arouse his suspicions, or if the strange assumption she made regarding the divorce and who he would choose in America had touched his bottom line. He couldn't possibly be suddenly angry, right? Chapter 209. This was the first Cold War in a long time. Jinwan resisted the urge to go out and take a look. She shut herself in the bedroom and refused to step out. The next morning, she took a shower in the bathroom. She saw that the scar on her face was almost unnoticeable. She only needed to put on a layer of foundation to hide it. Only the gauze on her forehead was slightly noticeable. She planned to find a nearby hairdresser to cut her fringe to cover it. Anyway, her hair was of good quality and grew quickly. When the scar on her forehead gradually faded, her fringe would grow back. It would not affect her appearance at all. The living room was quiet. Jinwan changed her clothes and walked out. The moment she opened the bedroom door, she was met with a pair of eyes. Mo Jingshen met her gaze calmly. He sat in the living room. It seemed like he had not slept all night. Jinwan stood by the door and watched him. He did not seem to have any intention of making a sound. If Jinwan had not come out and seen him, who knew how long he would have sat here? Facing Mo Jingshen, the atmosphere was so heavy that she instinctively held her breath. At this moment, Feng Ling opened the door and entered. Clearly, she had received Mo Jingshen's notice to send Jinwan back to T University today. However, the moment Feng Ling entered, she sharply sensed the undercurrent between the two of them. She stood by the door in a daze and was about to turn to leave when Mo Jingshen called her back. Send her to T University. Feng Ling paused and could only turn back. She saw that Jinwan had already changed. Although there was a wound on her forehead, she seemed to be in good condition. However, the living room was eerily quiet. In the end, Feng Ling spoke up. Madam, Mr. Mo has arranged a temporary transfer for me in T University's business department. From today onwards, I can follow you around in school. Don't worry, I'll do my best to keep a low profile. I won't let others know that I'm your bodyguard and won't affect your normal life. Temporary transfer? Then you'll live with me in T University? Jinwan looked at Feng Ling, hearing that Jinwan still planned to live in school and not return to the condo. Feng Ling subconsciously turned to Mo Jingshen, who was sitting on the sofa. The man on the sofa did not speak, as though their conversation had nothing to do with him. I'll follow wherever you live, Feng Ling replied. Jinwan did not speak again. Her eyes seemed to inadvertently drift toward the sofa. In the past, Jinwan didn't understand. People always said that Mo Jingshen was a noble creature who could freeze people to death just by sitting there quietly. She always felt that it was an exaggeration. She admitted that he was cold and noble, but it was too exaggerated to say that he could freeze people to death in an instant. How could he be so scary? But now, Mo Jingshin only sat there and did not say a word, but Jinwan could deeply feel she had really offended him last night. Those inexplicable hypotheses seemed to have inadvertently touched his reverse scale. He felt as if he had plucked the fur off a tiger's head. Was what he said yesterday too much? She looked at him and was about to speak when she heard Mo Jingshin's phone ring. He picked up the call and did not look at her again. Countless words were stuck in her throat. Jinwan really wanted to say that she did not mean it that way last night. Divorce and questioning were all her hypotheses. She had been out of her mind to cause trouble on the birthday that he had meticulously planned for him. She wanted to apologize, but after trying for a long time, as she watched his cold back view as he stood up to answer the call, she could not say a single word. After all, her anger yesterday was just a simple matter of being a little jealous and throwing tantrum with him. But Mo Jingshin was really, really angry. She was just relying on the fact that he had always given in to her. That moment of incoherence had caused her to be caught unprepared. I still have matters to attend to at the company. I have to return to High City today. When Mo Jingshin put down the phone, he turned back to see that Jinwan had not left. He lowered his head to look at his watch, his tone calm and unperturbed. Have Feng Ling send you to T University before 8. If you want to stay in the dormitory, that's fine. I'll have someone pack up your luggage and send it to the dormitory. If you really don't want to stay in this condo, since it's already under your name, you can rent it or sell it. Are you leaving now? Jinwan held it in but still blurted out. Mo Jingshin looked at her. Jinwan thought that he would at least say something, but in the end, the man did not say anything. He picked up his jacket and turned to leave. Mrs. Mo, it's almost time for Professor Lin's class. Feng Ling saw that Jinwan clearly wanted to chase after him to apologize, but was still holding it in. She comforted her and said, Mr. Mo must have some matters to attend to at the company, so he went back today. When he finds some time in the next few days, he will definitely come to see you. Seeing that Jinwan did not respond, Feng Ling asked patiently, Do you want to go eat breakfast first? Jinwan focused and turned to the kitchen. She took out the cake and cut it while saying, No need. There's still so much cake. I'll eat some and then go to T University. Feng Ling looked at the cake and asked in surprise, Why are there only 4 left? Jinwan paused and raised her eyes to look at her. Do you know how many cakes there were here yesterday? I do. On Saturday night, I saw Mr. Mo come. I was surprised at first, but I later learned that he arrived that morning and flew over from High City overnight. He specially booked a nearby bakery and spent the whole day making 21 cakes of different sizes and colors for you. Yesterday, I sent the cakes and roses over with the bakery's staff. Feng Ling saw that Jinwan's figure seemed to have been petrified and realized that she had said something she shouldn't have. She immediately stopped talking. On Friday night, he flew over from High City. On Saturday night, he brought her back from the bar and took care of her for an entire night. On Sunday night, he angered her to the point that he could not sleep. In other words, he had not slept for 3 whole days. Jinwan did not speak. She cut open the reddish cake and gently picked up the pair of chocolate figurines on top. She placed them on a plate and carefully placed them there without eating. Seeing that Jinwan had suddenly lowered her head to eat the cake, Feng Ling approached. Mrs. Mo, did you quarrel with Mr. Mo? However, the moment she approached, she saw that Jinwan's eyes were red as she ate the cake with her head lowered. Feng Ling was usually a serious and cold person. When she saw that Jinwan, who had never shed a single tear, had her eyes red as though she was about to cry, but was holding it in, Feng Ling immediately panicked. Afraid that she would really cry, Feng Ling frantically passed her tissues to her. Jinwan shook her head and avoided Feng Ling's hand. I'm fine. Then should I send you to T University now? Chapter 2:10. All right. Feng Ling glanced at her once more before retreating. Jinwan recalled how she had cut the cake into pieces yesterday and how Mo Jingshin had passed it to her. Her heart felt as though it had been stung by bees. Right now, her emotions were complicated and indescribable. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. She wished she could rush to the airport right now to look for Mo Jingshin. But when she recalled how he did not even spare her a glance earlier, her heart felt as though it had been stung by 100 bees. After Feng Ling sent Jin Wan to T University, Jin Wan kept considering whether she should return to High City. In the afternoon, Mo Jingshin should have already landed in High City. She felt even more anxious, and her mind wandered off for a long time during class. After class in the evening, a sudden rainstorm wreaked havoc in T-City, causing the airport to be temporarily closed. All flights that night were delayed. Jinwon had no choice but to temporarily give up on her plans to return to High City. She wanted to calm her restless heart and wait for Mo Jingshun to cool down before returning. That night, the moment Jinwon returned to the dormitory, she saw that Su Shui's bed was already empty. Ling Feifei had placed her luggage on the empty bed, intending to use it as her spare bed. Jinwon, where have you been these past 2 days? Ling Feifei sat by the bed, applying skincare and wiping her face while glancing at Jinwon through the mirror. Jinwon did not reply. Aya, you cut your bangs? Ling Feifei asked again before turning to look at Jinwon seriously. Bai Wei also glanced at Jinwon. It's quite pretty. Jinwon, you already have the beauty of a fairy. Your skin is also good, and after cutting your bangs, you look like an underage high school student. Aren't you afraid of being abducted? Hearing these words, Ling Feifei, who had always claimed that her beauty was not inferior to Jinwon's, immediately became unhappy. Jinwon's looks are only SOSO. Isn't it too much to praise her as a fairy? Bai Wei ignored Ling Feifei's words. Seeing that Jinwon had been quiet ever since she entered, as though she had something on her mind, she decided to keep quiet and did not disturb her. By the way, Jinwon, you haven't been around these past 2 days. You don't know what happened to Su Shui, right? Ling Feifei's mouth seemed unable to stop moving as she suddenly brought up another topic. Jinwon looked at her and asked, even though she already knew the answer, what happened to her? Well, didn't you see that everything on the bed is gone? Ling Feifei glanced at the bed that Su Shui was sleeping on. I don't know what happened. Yesterday, many police officers suddenly came to T University. At the time, no one saw what happened. However, that very night, Su Shui suddenly left. It seemed like she had taken a leave of absence from school. Not even a shadow of her was seen. She disappeared without a trace. Professor Lin didn't tell us the reason either. Afterward, the dormitory's belongings were also removed. It was as though she had never entered T University before. Jinwon glanced at the empty bed next to her. Isn't Su Shui on good terms with you? Do you know why she left? Ling Feifei stared at Jinwon with a gossipy expression. She could not wait to interrogate her for some information. You clearly know that Jinwon won't be around these 2 days. Why are you asking so much? How could she possibly know? She and Su Shui haven't known each other for that long. Bai Wei said indifferently. Ling Feifei snorted. She disliked how Bai Wei always spoke against her. The 3 of them in this dormitory were completely from different worlds. After Su Shui left, would her bed be unoccupied? Hopefully, no one else would come. Otherwise, she would have no place to store her belongings. 8 in the evening. Ling Feifei was just about to place her belongings on the bed when Feng Ling appeared in front of the dormitory door. The 3 women stared at the short-haired woman who had suddenly appeared in the dormitory. Jinwon was actually quite surprised. She did not expect that Feng Ling would directly move into her dormitory. Did she really plan on being inseparable 24 hours a day? Had the incident that night scared Feng Ling out of her mind? When Bai Wei heard that a new temporary transfer student would be arriving today, she was not too surprised. However, she was still intimidated by Feng Ling's aura. Ling Feifei originally glanced at the door disapprovingly. She saw that Feng Ling was dressed in a black lady's t-shirt, black jeans, and black leather boots. She was only carrying a black travel bag. She did not look like a daughter from an illustrious family who had received proper upbringing. She was especially disapproving and did not even plan on giving up the bed opposite her. Why is there another one? Ling Feifei said mockingly. Why does Professor Lin accept just anyone? It's fine if she's the manager of a small studio. But now, even female gangsters from the underworld can learn business management from Professor Lin? Don't speak so much. Is there a need for you to comment on what kind of students Professor Lin accepts? Bai Wei frowned and reprimanded her. Ling Feifei rolled her eyes toward the door. In any case, our dormitory is already full. This bed can't be emptied either. Go live in another dormitory. She's definitely here because of Professor Lin's arrangements. Why are you trying to coax her? Bai Wei really could not stand her. Bai Wei, why are you always rebuking me? Can't you see that I have so much luggage that I don't have anywhere to put it? Ling Feifei was unhappy. Bai Wei smiled coldly. I can't stand it. Who cares if you can't stand it or not? In any case, this bed is mine. 3 people are enough for this dormitory. I have to speak to Professor Lin. He can't let anyone else stay here. Ling Feifei appeared to be unwilling to give up the bed no matter what. Feng Ling coldly glanced at her. Jin Wan was still wondering if she would be able to adapt to living in such a dormitory. She wondered if she should just return to the condo with Feng Ling. At this moment, Feng Ling walked in. She placed the black travel bag in her hands on Su Xue's bed. Just as Ling Feifei abruptly stood up and was about to ask her to take the bag away, she kicked the pink luggage off the bed. What are you doing? Ling Feifei was startled. She stared in disbelief at the various clothes that had fallen out of the luggage. She directly cursed with a shrill voice. You dare to kick my things? You've dirted my luggage and clothes. Can you afford to compensate me? You've taken up my bed and wasted my time. Can you afford to compensate me? Feng Ling coldly retorted. Under Ling Feifei's furious gaze, she sat down on the bed. Without even glancing at her, she only said coldly, Feng Ling, 23 years old. Since 200X, you've been the national martial arts champion for 3 consecutive years. You have a black belt in Taekwondo, champion in Los Angeles in women's single combat, coach of America's 11 base. Please advise me. The moment her words landed, the dormitory fell into a strange silence. Bai Wei and Ling Feifei stared at Feng Ling. Their eyes were about to fall out of their sockets. Ling Feifei appeared as though she had swallowed a fly. She could not say a single word. Chapter 2:11. As the saying went, evil people would be tortured by evil people. This was probably the logic. Ling Feifei was so angry that she abruptly got off the bed to pick up the luggage from the ground. She glared fiercely at Feng Ling's face, but the latter only glanced at her coldly. Ling Feifei immediately shrunk her shoulders and bit her lips. She unwillingly brought the luggage back to her own bed. Jin Wan's smile was mild. She did not pay them any further attention and sat on the bed to read. However, it was as though she was in the day. She could not focus. The rain continued to pour outside. In order not to affect Jin Wan's normal life in T University, Feng Ling did not take the initiative to greet her. Right now, Ling Feifei and Bai Wei's attention was focused on her. Jin Wan could sit quietly on the bed for a while. A black belt in Taekwondo is already very impressive. There's actually martial arts and shooting. Bai Wei looked at the black-dressed Feng Ling with some surprise and attempted to chat with her. Feng Ling indifferently glanced at her. She remembered that Jin Wan had told her about the 2 roommates' situations and personalities. She nodded slightly at Bai Wei. She did not look at her coldly, nor was she overly warm. It could be considered a simple greeting. Ling Feifei sat by the bed and muttered softly, "This is a female dormitory. Professor Lin actually allowed a tomboy to stay here. I'm starting to suspect her sexual orientation. In the future, even if I shower and change my clothes, I probably won't be able to return to the dormitory." Feng Ling appeared as though she did not hear anything. She kicked the trash can that had appeared by the bed aside. "Whose is it? Take it." Ling Feifei turned to look, and her expression turned even more ashen. She was about to scold her when she raised her eyes to meet Feng Ling's gaze. She bit her lips harshly and angrily dragged the trash can that had almost been kicked over back to her bed. She unwillingly scolded softly, "Lunatic!" The next day, due to the heavy rain yesterday, the weather was slightly chilly. After class, Jin Wan returned to the apartment outside the school to retrieve her coat. Even before she opened the door, Jean Wan still held onto a sliver of hope that Mo Jingshun might not have left yesterday. Perhaps he had changed to an afternoon flight and was also delayed in T-City by the heavy rain. After all, Mo Jingshun had never been angry with her. Perhaps he did not want to hold it against her for now and thus ignored her. As long as she sincerely explained to him when they met again. The door was pushed open and 2 suitcases were placed neatly in the living room. Other than that, there was no one else. Standing at the door, Jean Wan's heart sank. Previously, he said that if she wanted to stay in the dormitory, he would order someone to pack her luggage and send it to her. It was up to her whether she wanted to rent or sell this apartment. He was indeed a man of his word. Her luggage should have already been packed yesterday, but because of the heavy rain, it was not delivered to her. Unwilling to give up, she searched every room again and found that all traces of Mo Jingshun's birthday celebration had been erased. The traces of fireworks on the balcony, the thick scent of cream wafting through the room, the uneaten cakes in the kitchen, and the chocolate doll she had carefully placed in the tray had all been taken away. Nothing was left. Jean Wan silently sat on the sofa and looked at this room that was half familiar and half strange to her. The scene of Mo Jingshun accompanying her to watch television and pressing her against the window and kissing her 21 times suddenly seemed like a dream. The warm and comfortable apartment was only filled with the faint scent of air freshener. Everything made her feel distant and unfamiliar. Feng Ling was still waiting downstairs. Jean Wan composed herself and carried the suitcase out alone. The suitcase was very heavy, and it took some effort to carry it. When she reached downstairs, Feng Ling saw the luggage in her hands and rushed over. "Mrs. Mo, my luggage. I don't know if the dormitory cabinets will be able to fit it," Jean Wan calmly said. Feng Ling furrowed her brows. "Although Mr. Mo is angry with you, there's no need for you to make things so difficult for yourself. This apartment is under your name. It's fine if you leave your luggage here. There's no need to bring it all to the dormitory." Jean Wan's bones were still somewhat stubborn. It was only now that she completely realized that Mo Jingshun was being serious with her. What exactly did I say to provoke him? Divorce? Or did she ask him who he would choose to spend the rest of his life with? Jean Wan carried the suitcase to the car with some difficulty. Seeing that Jean Wan was also a little stubborn after being provoked, Feng Ling helplessly glanced at her and turned to help her carry it. "No, I'll do it myself." Jean Wan avoided her hand and carried the luggage into the car herself. Then Jean Wan leaned against the car and panted for a while. There were only various tumbling emotions in her mind. In the end, she suddenly took out her cell phone and glanced at it. In the recent call history, she found Mo Jingshun's private cell phone number. After staring at it for a long time, she suddenly called him. However, after the call went through, the cell phone only beeped, and Jean Wan's heart seemed to be shaken. She then turned to look at the suitcase in the car and abruptly hung up the phone. Feng Ling watched from the side. Why did she feel that when Jean Wan was calm and rational, everything was fine? But when she really encountered a problem, she was like a little woman who had just learned to fall in love. The first time she got angry, the first time she quarreled, she suddenly became disorganized, and she didn't know how to reconcile. Even she could tell that if Jean Wan really called him right now and said a few words to him, Mr. Mo's anger would definitely be appeased. But clearly, this was only a bystander's view. Jean Wan was lost in love and lost her direction. Although the phone only rang once, Jean Wan was certain that the call went through. After about 10 minutes, her cell phone remained silent. There was no call back, nor was there any message. Feng Ling had already boarded the car. She saw that Jean Wan was leaning against the car in a daze. "Mrs. Mo, are we still leaving? Let's go." Jean Wan lowered her eyes, placed her cell phone in her pocket, and returned to the car. Feng Ling's hand was on the steering wheel. She turned to see that Jean Wan's expression clearly showed that she was in a bad mood. "Are you sure you want to bring the luggage back to the dormitory? This condo. Take it first. Even if the condo is under my name, I didn't buy it. Leave it empty first. We'll talk about it later." "Actually, Mrs. Mo, you and Mo can. Feng Ling, my head hurts. I'm going to sleep for a while. Wake me up when we reach T University." Although she knew that T University was not far from here and that it would only take a few minutes to drive, Jinwan still closed her eyes and leaned her head against the car window, no longer speaking. Your head hurts again? Did you really get a concussion from the collision that day? Let's go to the hospital. Chapter 2:12. Haicheng, Mo Corporation. The executive meeting room went silent for a moment because of the short ringtone. Ever since CEO Mo returned from T-City, his entire being emitted a frightening coldness. Although he was not easy to talk to in the company, today he was extremely difficult to talk to. No one dared to approach him for fear of losing their jobs. The meeting was proceeding in an orderly manner. Mo Jingshan sat in the seat of honor and listened to the reports of the executives with a cold expression. It was not until his cell phone on the table rang that his expressionless face changed slightly. However, he only took a glance at his cell phone. The ringtone was very short and almost stopped after one ring. Everyone in the conference room had personally witnessed the change in temperature from the coldest days of winter to the perennial ice and snow in the North Pole. It had always been cold, but right now it was so cold that it penetrated their hearts. Shenmu stood by Mo Jingshan's side and did not dare speak. Earlier, he saw Mo Jingshan's phone light up. It was Jin Wan's number. However, the strange thing was that CEO Mo did not make any movements to answer the call. The other party also hung up immediately. What situation was this? Could it be that they quarreled? CEO Mo, should we pause the meeting and return the call? Shenmu asked softly. No need. Continue. Mo Jingshan's tone was extremely mild. That night at 8 o'clock, Jinwan packed up the things she had brought back from the condo. She did not pay attention to any of the questions in the room. Only Feng Ling remained silent as she watched Jinwan pack up. She could tell that Jinwan was clearly using the tiredness of packing to vent her emotions. Right now, it was better for her to do her own things. By the time Jinwan finished packing and returned after taking a shower, it was already 9 o'clock. Nowadays, young people were used to staying up late. Ling Feifei tossed and turned on the bed, unable to sleep. She said, Professor Lin is really too strict. Usually, he doesn't allow us to go out at night. He even arranged for security guards to stand guard outside our dormitory. Really, at night, even a fly can't fly out. I suspect that I'm not here to study, but to enter a small prison. Professor Lin is being cautious. Everyone in the management class has a high status. They all have powerful families behind them. If something were to happen to anyone here, not only would Professor Lin's reputation be ruined, he wouldn't be able to handle the responsibility. Therefore, it's understandable that he doesn't allow us to leave school at night, Bai Wei replied. Ling Feifei made a tisk sound. This is too boring. This is our first time in T-City, and we don't even have the chance to eat the local delicacies. How about this? How about the four of us take turns to treat each other? This Saturday, I'll treat everyone. Sunday, it'll be Bai Wei's treat. Next Saturday, it'll be Jin Wan's treat, and the following Sunday, it'll be Feng Ling's. We can only find time on the weekends to eat, drink, and play. After Ling Feifei finished speaking, no one in the dormitory replied. As if to support herself, she said, then I'll take it as a silent agreement. It's settled then. Bai Wei lazily raised her head from the bed and asked, I see that you really came to T University to mess around. As expected, you don't put any effort into your studies. Ling Feifei pursed her lips. I'm also very attentive in class, all right? As she spoke, Ling Feifei glanced at Feng Ling. Look, Feng Ling is the one who doesn't put any effort into her studies. In class today, I noticed that she didn't pay much attention to Professor Lin's class. Even now, I haven't seen her take out her books to revise. If we're talking about slackers, isn't she worse than me? Feng Ling glanced at her indifferently. The moment Ling Feifei met her gaze, she subconsciously turned her head away, not daring to meet her gaze. She's a martial arts champion. What are you? Bai Wei chuckled. Ling Feifei did not speak. Her gaze suddenly shifted in Jin Wan's direction. Feng Ling's martial arts skills truly caused others to shrink back. It was best not to provoke her. Bai Wei was an executive who had experienced many trials and tribulations in a large company. If they really wanted to compete in verbal skills, she could not compare to Feng Ling. On the other hand, this Jin Wan always appeared quiet and unconcerned. I say, Jin Wan, you spend the most time revising every day. What's the point? Isn't it just a small real estate studio? What big development can there be? No matter how much you learn, you'll only be able to manage tens of people. I feel that it's a waste of time for you to learn management from Professor Lin. Jin Wan had originally planned to sleep. When she heard these words, she did not turn around to look at her. She only casually replied, "A small studio is also a work organization. Good business management will have the same effect on a company with tens of thousands of people or a studio with tens of people. I think what you should do is think of a way to hug onto someone's thigh and get them to invest tens of millions of yuan in your studio. It's more important to raise the standards of your own studio. Otherwise, how can such a small studio be presentable?" At this moment, Feng Ling suddenly glanced at Ling Feifei coldly. "Do you like to meddle in other people's business?" Ling Feifei was confused. "I meddle in Jin Wan's business. What does it have to do with you?" Long-winded, Feng Ling expressionlessly rolled her eyes. "Right now, it's time to rest. Maintain silence, understand?" "You." Ling Feifei abruptly sat up, glaring at her. However, Feng Ling coldly picked up her earphones and put them on. She did not even look at her. The dormitory was very quiet. No one paid her any attention. Ling Feifei wanted to throw a tantrum, but did not dare to direct it at Feng Ling. She then turned to look at Jin Wan, who had yet to turn around. She felt that this cold and unapproachable Feng Ling was always faintly protecting Jin Wan. She was only the person in charge of a small studio. She had no money, no power, and no background. Yet, her popularity was actually quite good. The dormitory finally returned to silence. Jin Wan closed her eyes for a moment. Although it was quiet, she could not fall asleep. She opened her eyes again. Today, it was not raining outside. However, T-City's weather was indeed cold. The sound of the air conditioner in the dormitory was not loud. However, in such a quiet environment, it was especially obvious. The whooshing sound made it difficult for one to fall asleep. The lights in the dormitory were also turned off at 9:30 p.m. Jin Wan picked up her phone in the darkness and opened the screen to take a look. There was still not a single call. There was not even a single text message. In the darkness, the brightness of the phone screen was slightly blinding. Jin Wan opened up her recent call history and looked at the call she had made to Mo Jingxun in the morning. She was sure that she had really made the call. However, even now, several hours had already passed. Her phone remained silent. She confirmed that her phone was not broken. She also sent a text message to check the balance of her phone, proving that it was still working. Jin Wan pressed down on the screen to turn it off. Not long after, she turned it back on. She repeated this for a long time. Chapter 213. Jin Wan's phone, which originally had quite a bit of battery, was constantly switched on and off until it ran out of battery. Although Feng Ling was wearing earphones, her gaze was focused on this side. She wanted to say something and have Jin Wan call Mo Jingxun to stop this stalemate. However, seeing Jin Wan's expression, she thought about it and decided not to say anything. On the weekend, Ling Feifei insisted on treating everyone to a meal. No matter how they tried to push it away, she insisted on treating everyone to a meal. She said that she wanted to build up their relationship. Even if it was only for 3 months, they could still be considered roommates. "What do you want to eat?" Ling Feifei saw that Bai Wei and Feng Ling were ignoring her and decided to hold Jin Wan's arm to ask. Jin Wan originally wanted to avoid her, but this Ling Feifei was too clingy. Furthermore, they would be living together for more than 2 months. No matter what, she did not want to make things too awkward on the surface. Thus, she did not move and casually said, "Anything is fine. Anything is fine. There's an Italian restaurant near T University. I heard that the boss is a famous chef with 3 Michelin stars. How about I treat you guys to that restaurant today?" "Sure. Anyway, you're treating. You can decide what to eat. I don't mind." Bai Wei was more casual. Feng Ling saw that Jin Wan's attitude had always been very tolerant. She guessed that Jin Wan had always treated Ling Fei as a spoiled and immature young lady and could not be bothered to fuss over it. She did not bother with these matters. Since Jin Wan did not reject, Feng Ling could only casually reply, "Whatever." Seeing that everyone had agreed, Ling Fei said, "Then it's settled. This time, I'll treat you guys. There's no need to fight with me over the bill. Just do as I said earlier. We'll take turns. Next time, you guys can treat me to a better meal." After coming to T University, this was the first dormitory gathering. Although they were not too enthusiastic, they still gave each other some face. When Ling Fei treated them, the Italian restaurant, they went to cost about 1,000 yuan per person. The four of them spent more than 5,000 yuan. And this was after everyone allowed Ling Fei to order whatever she wanted. They barely ate much, but it was already very expensive. The next day, Sunday, Bai Wei invited the guests back. She took them to another very famous sushi restaurant in T City. In recent years, sushi had become very popular within the country. The price and quality varied, but this place was indeed not bad. It was a high-end and luxurious restaurant, and a few of them spent $6,000 to $7,000. Every time they ate, Ling Fei would be very lively. She would always try to find a topic to talk about, but no one would pay attention to her. She would always pick on Jin Wan. After all, in her eyes, Jin Wan was just a small character. When she was happy, she would hold her arm as her roommate. When she was unhappy, she could casually poke at her. However, every time, Bai Wei and Feng Ling would speak up to defend her. If it was only Feng Ling who defended Jin Wan, they might have suspected something. However, even Bai Wei always stood by Jin Wan's side. Ling Fei could not find fault with them and could only tease them from time to time. She then smiled and said that she was only joking. Right now, if it weren't for the fact that Jin Wan did not take Ling Fei seriously and did not care about them at all, with her original temper, she would definitely make Ling Fei cry and go home to find her parents. Since it was not important, she cannot be bothered with it. In any case, she was indeed a spoiled, rich young lady. A week later, on Saturday, it was Jin Wan's turn to treat. Ling Fei sat in the dormitory room and suddenly asked, "What are we eating this week?" The other three people in the dormitory had almost forgotten about this agreement. After all, it was only a meal. Who would really need to remember the rules? Ling Fei turned to look at Jin Wan. "Jin Wan, it's your turn to treat today." It did not matter to her whether she was treating or not. Jin Wan did not care about such things. However, it had been more than a week since she communicated with Mo Jingshan. They did not even exchange a single phone call. Right now, she did not appear to have changed much, but her heart was actually heavy. She could not muster up any other interest. "What do you want to eat?" she casually asked. "I've already tasted the skills of the Michelin star chef from the Italian restaurant. I've also tried the most famous sushi restaurant in T City. How about we eat seafood this week? Previously, I saw on the internet that many of the oysters shipped from overseas are of superb quality. They're big and delicious. Let's go eat a seafood feast." "You're really demanding an exorbitant price." Bai Wei mocked from the side. "Don't tell me you're tempted by the seafood restaurant you heard about a few days ago. You've always wanted Jin Wan to treat us there?" Ling Fei ignored her, continuing on her own. "It's the one I heard about previously. How about we go there to eat?" Jin Wan calmly glanced at her. "Up to you." That seafood restaurant's prices were indeed not low. For the four of them to eat together, and it was a seafood feast that Ling Fei had specially ordered, it would cost at least 10,000 yuan. Although none of the people in this dormitory lacked money, Ling Fei did not live the life of a commoner. She never ate anything that cost tens or hundreds of yuan. Whenever she went out, she would either eat a palace-set meal or eat expensive, flashy, but impractical, luxurious food. Jin Wan knew that when she was once so arrogant, she was only spoiled when dealing with people. She had not spoiled herself to this extent. Seeing that Jin Wan had no objections, Bai Wei spread out her hands. "You guys decide. I'm fine with anything." Feng Ling did not speak, but did not reject. In the end, the few of them went to the seafood restaurant that Ling Fei insisted on eating at. The moment they sat down, they originally agreed to order a seafood feast. However, after ordering, Ling Feifei said that she did not feel like there was a main course and that seafood was not enough. She tugged the waiter over and ordered many other dishes. That's enough. This is enough for us. How much can a few women eat? Do you still want to order? Bai Wei said. I already said that I want to eat oysters. Although this restaurant's oysters are expensive, they were all flown in from overseas. They're especially fresh. It's rare for us to come here, so we have to eat our fill. Ling Feifei ignored her and continued to order what she wanted. Jinwan placed her phone on the table and only occasionally chatted with Bai Wei. Her gaze occasionally shifted to the phone that had remained silent for more than a week. Occasionally, she would retract her gaze and look toward Ling Feifei, who was seated opposite her, still talking to the waitress. After ordering, all the food was served. Bai Wei could not help but complain when she saw that aside from the set meal, there were so many dishes. You ordered so much. If you have the ability, eat them all. Aren't there 4 of us? Besides, Feng Ling practices martial arts. You must eat a lot, right? Ling Feifei turned to look at Feng Ling. Feng Ling did not even raise her eyelids. She coldly said, I'm allergic to seafood. You guys eat. I'll just order a bowl of noodles. Chapter 214. Bai Wei immediately mocked. She glanced at the embarrassed Ling Feifei. Remember to finish it all. If there's too much left, it'll be too much. Anyone could tell that she was trying to trick Jinwan. She clearly cannot finish it, yet she still ordered so much. In the end, she really cannot finish it. Not to mention the extra dishes, even the seafood feast set meal was only half eaten. Bai Wei watched Ling Feifei mockingly the entire time. Ling Feifei coughed, but did not speak. Are you all full? As the one treating today, Jinwan did not eat much. After taking a sip of fruit juice, she calmly asked, I'm full, but there's so much left. What a waste, Bai Wei said. It's fine. Seafood isn't suitable for takeaway. There's nothing we can do about the leftovers, Jinwan calmly said. She stood up to pay the bill. As expected, Ling Feifei did not have any good intentions. The dishes she ordered later on were all more expensive than anything else in the set meal. Who could imagine that 4 women with small appetites would spend more than 20,000 yuan on a meal in a seafood restaurant? Even someone like Mo Jingshen, with his wealth, would not exaggerate to such an extent. Whenever he brought Jinwan out to eat, he would only choose what she liked. He did not care about the price. Even if it was tens, hundreds, or even thousands of yuan, it was fine as long as it was clean and tasty. Today, Jinwan had truly broadened her horizons. However, no matter how expensive this seafood restaurant was, it could not possibly have such a price. In the end, it was only because Ling Feifei had ordered the most expensive dishes that had exceeded 20,000 yuan. Jinwan first went to the bathroom. When she came out, she saw that Ling Feifei had come out. Seeing that Jinwan did not immediately pay the bill, Ling Feifei said in amusement, It seems like you really ordered quite a lot today. It should be quite a lot, right? Did you bring enough money? Do you have enough left on your card? Jinwan glanced at her. Before you ordered, you didn't even consider if I had enough money. Are you planning to pay for me now? Ling Feifei immediately smiled mockingly. We agreed that you'll be treating today. I've already treated you. How can I treat you again? If you really can't afford it, you could discuss it with the owner of the restaurant and see if he can pay on credit. After speaking, Ling Feifei smiled as she picked up her bag and headed to the door to wait. Clearly, she did not plan on standing with Jinwan. She did not want to embarrass herself if Jinwan really wanted to buy on credit. Bai Wei, who had also walked out from behind, heard their conversation and approached to ask, Jinwan, do you really have enough money? Jinwan smiled. Don't worry. Wait for me outside. Bai Wei wanted to offer to help Jinwan pay for it, but seeing from Jinwan's expression that she did not need their help, she did not ask further. She only glanced at her with concern. The waiter at the counter heard their conversation and looked at Jinwan suspiciously. Miss, do you really want to pay on credit? We don't accept credit here. If you don't have money, you can ask your friend to pay for it. The waiter had yet to finish his words when Jinwan casually placed the card on the counter to cover his mouth. In truth, 20,000 yuan was not much. However, Ling Feifei's earlier mockery had caused the waiter to think that Jinwan really did not have much money. In the end, when he saw the gold card she had taken out, he recognized that it was impossible to obtain this type of card without a deposit of 5 million yuan. He did not dare to speak further and nimbly swiped the card to settle the bill. Jinwan initially planned to take out the black card that Mo Jingshan had given her. Usually, she was used to using this card. However, right now, she still took out the card that belonged to her that was placed below the black card. After settling the bill, Feng Ling walked over and glanced at her. People like Ling Feifei should find time to cover her head with a gunny sack and throw her into a corner to give her a good beating. Otherwise, she'll forever treat her stupidity as innocence and not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Jinwan curved her lips into a smile. I won't stop you if you want to beat her up, but it's best if you wait until after my classes are over. Back then, Professor Lin repeatedly reminded me not to be too calculated with these hedonistic young masters. If it weren't for Professor Lin's warning, I would have already made Ling Feifei regret staying in the same dormitory as me on the first day. Jinwan would never suffer such grievances. Her methods were not simple. Feng Ling knew this as well. Thus, when she saw how flexible Jinwan was recently, she really suspected that Jinwan's emotions had been affected by her relationship with Mo Jingshan. She actually allowed such a small character to jump around in front of her. As they walked out of the seafood restaurant, Ling Feifei was not surprised that Jinwan had paid the bill. She thought that Bai Wei and Feng Ling must have helped her pay quite a bit. She continued walking out with her head held high. That aura made it seem as though the three following behind her were little attendants. Before returning to T University, they passed by a large department store. There was a custom-made gown shop downstairs. Ling Feifei suddenly said, "That's right, before we graduate, it seems like we'll be able to make it to T University's 100-year anniversary. Have you guys prepared the gowns?" Bai Wei calmly replied, "There's still 2 months before the anniversary. What's the rush? Since there's a shop here, let's go in and take a look." Ling Feifei took the initiative and walked in. Feng Ling had already lost her patience with this rich young lady. She frowned as she stood outside the door. However, since they came out together and there was still some distance from T University, they still entered. Women naturally had no resistance to gowns. Initially, Bai Wei did not want to look, but after entering, she discovered that the gowns here were indeed not bad. Thus, she walked in with Ling Feifei. A staff member poured several cups of water and placed them on the coffee table in front of the sofa. Feng Ling sat on the sofa and did not leave. Bai Wei and Ling Feifei went to another high-end gown viewing area. Jinwan sat on the sofa and glanced out the window. When she saw a black ghost speeding by, her gaze faltered. However, that ghost was not a limited edition model. The license plate was also not one she was familiar with. It was merely a ghost brand, and there were many similar cars in this city. However, the one she was most familiar with would never appear in this city. Jinwan took a sip of water and placed the cup down. She stood up and said, "I'm going to walk around." Feng Ling glanced at her and subconsciously wanted to follow her. However, when she saw that Jinwan was only casually walking around the shop, she gave up on following and continued to sit on the sofa without moving. This shop could be considered T-City's flagship store for custom-made gowns. The designs of the gowns were all extraordinary, and the prices were not low. Jinwan walked in front of several fixed models. She saw a gown that was meticulously made of silver thread and raised her hand to gently touch the silver thread. Chapter 215. Due to the Ji family status in High City, be it in terms of wealth or power, they were all considered high class. Although Jinwan showed off her abilities in the upper class, she had always believed in one principle. When she was outside or in front of people who did not understand her, the best way to protect herself was to not expose her wealth. After coming to T-City, she did not wish to bicker with these kinds of people too much. Another reason was to seek peace and quiet, preventing others from inquiring about all sorts of things. However, at this moment, her hand had only just touched the corner of the silver-threaded gown. When an employee by the side heard Ling Feifei's words, she subconsciously reached out and forcefully pushed Jin Wan's hand away. Jin Wan looked at this gown that was not considered high-end in her eyes. She then expressionlessly turned toward the employee. This gown is worn by a model. Isn't it placed here for the customer to see? If it can't be touched, why place it here? There's no touching sign on it. Who gave you the right to push away a customer? Your guts aren't small. The employees in this gown store had all gone through a series of professional training. This employee had truly been rash earlier. The moment she met Jin Wan's cold gaze, she immediately regretted her actions. But being scolded in front of everyone, the shop assistant was still a little displeased. She said, "Miss, this is the treasure of our shop. The price is at least $1 million. The one you touched just now is also the most expensive one in this series. Of course, you can't touch it carelessly. If you break it or dirty it, you really can't afford to pay for it. This is an annual fashion show in Paris, France. It was just sent over from France and was only placed here this morning. We haven't had the time to put up the no-touching sign." The employee's confidence naturally stemmed from Ling Feifei's words earlier. She was certain that Jin Wan, who was dressed simply, would not be able to afford it. When Ling Feifei heard these words, she immediately approached. She looked curiously at the silver-threaded gown and could not help but reach out to touch it. "This one is indeed very beautiful. Can I try it on?" The shop assistant, who had just said that they did not have time to hang up the no-touching sign, saw Ling Feifei's actions and did not stop her. Instead, she smiled even more cheerfully and said, "Yes, miss, please proceed to the VIP changing room inside. Our shop assistant will help you try it on." As he spoke, the employee no longer paid any attention to Jin Wan, who did not have the slightest sign of a famous brand. He eagerly pulled the other employees along to serve this Miss Ling, who looked like a tycoon at first glance. Bai Wei coldly glanced in Ling Feifei's direction and walked to Jin Wan's side to comfort her. This young miss is probably born with her eyes on the top of her head. She's asking us to accompany her for a meal and to shop with her just to flaunt her wealth and let us see her illustrious family background. Ignore her. At this time, Jin Wan glanced at Feng Ling, who was looking at her. Feng Ling sat on the sofa and looked at her teasingly, as if saying, "You can even tolerate this? That gown earlier, what do you think of it?" Jin Wan calmly withdrew her gaze, turning to look at Bai Wei by her side. Bai Wei raised her brows. "It's all right. It's indeed beautiful, but it's a little expensive. However, if it's a new model from the Paris fashion show, it's definitely worth the price." "Do you plan on attending the 100th anniversary?" Jin Wan asked. "If time permits, I'll attend. It's rare for me to have a few months of time to return to my student days after entering the workforce. Back then, I didn't have the chance to attend such a 100th anniversary event. This time, I'll just treat it as a perfect ending to my pitifully simple student days." Bai Wei spoke with a smile. She looked at Jin Wan. "What about you?" Jin Wan did not reply. She calmly glanced at the other gowns around her and calmly said, "Speaking of which, that gown earlier is quite suitable for you. That gown is more mature and elegant. Ling Feifei's figure is too petite, and her aura is unable to support that gown. If you wear it, you'll definitely be stunning." Bai Wei heard these words and immediately chuckled. "Forget it. It's just a school anniversary. It's enough for me to dress appropriately and generously. Even if I become an executive in a foreign company, my annual salary would only be a few million. There's no need to spend so much money on a beauty contest. It's obvious that Ling Feifei has been spoiled rotten by her family. We're definitely not people from the same world as her." The two of them casually chatted, from the gown to the school anniversary, and from the school anniversary to Professor Lin's teaching methods. Not long later, Ling Feifei came out wearing the gown. It was as Jin Wan had said. Ling Feifei's figure was on the smaller side and could not support the elegance of this gown at all. Although she had purposely found a pair of 10-centimeter high heels to wear, making her appear taller, she was still unable to support it. "How is it? Does it look good?" Ling Feifei stood in front of them and turned around proudly. "I plan to buy this one." Bai Wei smiled, but did not speak. She did not say that it looked good, nor did she say that it did not look good. Jinwan only raised her brows. She did not speak, but her gaze spoke volumes. In truth, her attitude was the same as Bai Wei's. It was just that she clearly did not feel that it was good. She was just too lazy to say anything. However, the employee who had pushed Jinwan earlier intentionally observed Jinwan's expression. Ling Feifei also intentionally looked toward Jinwan when the employee suddenly spoke up. "Miss Ling, it's best if you don't ask them. Some people are born to be envious of others. There's no meaning in asking like this. Right now, some people's expressions are clearly saying that the grapes are sour. They definitely won't say that it looks good." That's right, that's right. The other employee, in order to quickly sell this most expensive gown and earn a generous salary, also chimed in. "You can't afford it yourself, but you don't want others to buy it? What kind of gaze is that? It's as though Miss Ling's beautiful gown has pierced your eyes. Miss Ling, what kind of friends do you have? They're just roommates. They can't be considered friends." Ling Feifei stood there with a pleased expression, allowing the two employees to praise her as they pleased. She spun around twice and said, "This gown is indeed not bad. Are there any other styles? If you really like it, buy it," Jinwan said indifferently. "Let's go take a look at the other floors of the department store. Call us when you're done." After speaking, Jinwan and Bai Wei exchanged glances and turned to leave. Chapter 216. She truly could not stand Jinwan's nonchalant attitude, even though she clearly had no money. She directly mocked and ridiculed her. Jinwan's footsteps paused. She abruptly shifted her gaze to the arrogant shop assistant from the corner of her eyes. Feng Ling had already stood up. Earlier, she was preparing to head out with her. Right now, her gaze was playful as she watched Jinwan. She then glanced at the reckless shop assistant and felt that a good show was about to begin. Finally, Jinwan abruptly turned around and coldly glanced at the shop assistant behind her. "Where's your shop manager? Why are you looking for the manager?" The shop assistant did not seem to be afraid of her reporting them. She continued to sneer and say, "Our manager isn't here to serve idlers like you. What can you do even if you call the manager over?" However, due to Jinwan's request to see the manager, the shop manager, who was originally watching the commotion from the side, had no choice but to approach from the cashier. "Miss, I'm sorry. May I ask what you need?" The manager looked at her with a smile that did not reach her eyes. There was not a hint of respect for the customer in her eyes. Instead, because she had seen the entire situation, she knew that she did not have much ability and would not be able to cause any trouble. "I have a complaint. Your shop's sales assistant has spoken rudely to the customer. First, she used her hands to push the customer. Now, she is using her words to provoke the customer." Jinwan's face was expressionless. Her expression was exquisite and cold as she added. She even had the intention to compare the two customers who entered at the same time, elevating one and belittling the other. This kind of snobbish behavior is one more crime. The manager immediately laughed. "Miss, it's not that I want to criticize you, but earlier I saw everything with my own eyes. Our shop assistant didn't do anything. This gown is indeed not something anyone can touch. If you were like Miss Ling and could afford it, we naturally wouldn't say anything. However, you clearly can't afford it, yet you insisted on touching it. The shop assistant was afraid that you would dirty it and ruin it, so she subconsciously pushed you. She didn't hit hard, so why do you have to be so calculative? Besides, our shop assistant's judgment of people isn't wrong. Miss, there's nothing eye-catching on you. With one look, I can tell that you're just an ordinary student. You want to hug Miss Ling's thigh and accompany her to shop, but you have to be clear about your own status. You don't even have the right to touch something that she can try on. This is life. You don't have her money or power, so you're destined to be divided. What do you have to be unhappy about?" As the manager spoke, she examined Jinwan from head to toe. She estimated the price of her clothes, shoes, bag, and other items. She could not see the logo and could only see that they were from a few international brands of them. However, they were not. Miss could tell that the brand. Of them, of her, of them, of not there, of them, of Ling, but they were not. Could it be that everyone in the shop is snobbish? Bai Wei could not stand it any longer. She coldly reprimanded while frowning by Jin Wan's side. However, Jin Wan only smiled mildly. She reached out to block Bai Wei, who was about to stand up for her. At the same time, she picked up her phone and turned to make a call. The employees and managers, including Ling Feifei, who was about to change out of that gown to try on other gowns, all looked toward Jin Wan as though they were watching a show. Call her? Who could she call? Could it be that because she was too poor to afford a gown, she was going to angrily call the police like a junior high school student after being ridiculed by the employees? Even the Bureau of Industry and Commerce could not do anything about this, much less the police. How ignorant and childish. The employees sneered, fighting to change into Ling Feifei's gown. After Ling Feifei changed into another gown and came out, the employees carefully tidied up the most expensive silver gown in the store and put on the model. In a short 10 minutes, the employees surrounded Ling Feifei, one after another, trying to persuade her to buy a gown here today. At this moment, the manager in the store suddenly saw the figures of several people in charge of the department store appear by the door. She looked at the several big shots dressed in suits with solemn expressions. Seeing them suddenly push open the door, the manager was surprised and rushed forward to welcome them. CEO Chun, CEO Zhang, why do you have the time to personally patrol the store? Is the department store going to start a fire inspection again? Or is there some big shot coming to patrol the department store? If there's any situation, you could have just given us a call. How could we trouble the two of you to personally come? The manager walked over with a face full of smiles, but for some reason, her heart began to beat like a drum. This department store was the center of High City's G Corporation's chain department store in the country. It was also the largest G Corporation department store in the country aside from High City. Usually, these managers and directors would never personally come to patrol the employees. These were all big shots who sat high up in the department store's air-conditioned office. Today, they all appeared at the same time. The manager subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Otherwise, she would not have been able to invite them even if she wanted to. Seeing that the manager had already gone forward to welcome them, and seeing that it really was CEO Chun and CEO Zhang, the employees subconsciously rushed over to welcome them. Their faces were full of smiles as they welcomed them politely. In an instant, Ling Feifei, who was originally surrounded by a group of people, was suddenly left alone. Ling Feifei had just put on the second gown. It had a zipper at the back, but the zipper was only half pulled up. She angrily called for them to come back and help her pull it up, but after calling out twice, no one paid her any attention. CEO Chun and CEO Zhang were the direct managers of this department store. They were also the managers of High City's G Corporation and were the general manager and director of this department store. Normally, they did not have the opportunity to meet them. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were their immediate superiors. The other person who walked in after them was the brand manager of this VIP gown store. He was the person who could decide the life and death of all the employees in this store. CEO Chun, CEO Zhang. The manager saw that they walked in with straight faces and did not even glance at them. Her unease grew. Thinking back to the phone call she had made earlier, the manager subconsciously glanced in Jin Wan's direction. There were so many important people here. It couldn't be that they were really called here by her phone call, right? From Miss Ling's attitude, it was unlikely that she had such an ability. But for these immediate superiors to suddenly come personally, it could not be a coincidence. However, under the shocked gazes of everyone in the store, these immediate superiors suddenly approached Jin Wan. Chapter 217. When the people in the store heard these words, their legs immediately softened. What Miss G? The employee who had pushed Jin Wan earlier also looked toward the expressionless Jin Wan with a dumbfounded expression. Even Ling Feifei, who was struggling with the zipper of her gown, abruptly raised her eyes in shock. Wasn't Jin Wan just the person in charge of small studio? Why was the boss of a chain department store under the G Corporation treating her like a little eunuch seeing the Empress Dowager? CEO Chun and CEO Zhang eagerly handed their name cards over to Jin Wan. Miss G, we are the people in charge of this department store. If you have any problems in T-City that you need our help with, You can contact us at any time. Our phones will definitely be on for you 24 hours a day." Facing these two, Jinwon did not smile politely. Instead, she mildly glanced at the name cards they handed over. Her expression was cold and emotionless as she said, "Deal with the problems in your department store first." Her actions of not giving them any face not only did not cause CEO Chun and CEO Zhang to be unhappy, it even caused the two who were usually high and mighty to nod their heads repeatedly. They all agreed, "Yes, yes, yes. All right. We'll deal with it immediately." Who would dare to slight the G Corporation's true heiress with her presence? This entire department store belonged to their G family. "Miss G, please take a seat. Please take a seat first. Leave this to us." CEO Chun respectfully invited Ji and Wan to sit on the sofa by the side. He then indicated for the employee to bring some drinks over. Although the employee did not know the identity of this so-called Miss G, she was so frightened that she immediately poured a cup of coffee and brought it over. Feng Ling stood by the side, the corners of her lips seemingly curving up. Although Bai Wei was surprised, she also felt that the student that Professor Lin accepted was definitely not simple. Perhaps Jinwan was usually too low profile. However, on Ling Feifei's side, there was a sudden gotcha sound. The zipper on the back of her gown was abruptly torn due to her clenching her teeth and pulling it with great force. Jinwan held onto the coffee cup, lowering her head to slowly blow at the steam wafting out. Through the thick white fog, she could see the various expressions on Ling Feifei's and the employees' faces. She also saw Ling Feifei standing awkwardly because her zipper was damaged. She glared at her with an ugly expression. However, because she was unsure of Jinwan's identity, she did not know where to place her complicated gaze. Then, Jinwan exchanged a look with the supervisor who had already sensed that something was wrong and turned pale. The moment she met Jinwan's gaze, the supervisor's back stiffened. She wanted to ask CEO Chun and CEO Zhang who exactly she was, but just as she was about to speak, she suddenly received CEO Chun and CEO Zhang's glare. She was so frightened that her legs turned numb. "You again." Director Zhang suddenly reprimanded the supervisor. "We received a report last time saying that the gowns in your shop are not in line with the brand standard price. You even said that the manager of your store was too arrogant, so angry that some customers directly reported you to the higher-ups. You were the one who went to our office to write a letter of self-reflection and a letter of guarantee, promising to rectify the demeanor of the employees in the future and to cooperate with the change in the prices of the brands. It's only been 2 months, and your store is actually in trouble again." The supervisor's complexion was ashen. She wanted to explain, but was scolded back down by CEO Chun. By the side, the brand manager also reprimanded the supervisor and the employees. At the same time, he put on a fawning expression, trying to salvage their brand's image. He did not want these small characters to cause their brand to be removed from this large department store. However, the result was that this store was about to be closed down due to damaging the image of the department store. The G Corporation department store would no longer cooperate with this French luxury gown brand. They were ordered to clear away all the goods within 2 days, vacate the store, and never renew the contract or cooperate with them. They never expected that it would cause such a serious consequence. The supervisor and the employees who were about to lose their jobs also faced the consequences of having their wages deducted and being fined. Even the brand manager who had followed them here panicked. They knew that the problem lay with Jinwan and wanted to plead for her. However, Jinwan only sat quietly on the sofa, not even glancing at them. The brand manager was responsible for the image and marketing management of this French luxury gown brand in the entire province. Seeing that the largest department store in T-City was about to remove their brand, he angrily scolded the supervisor and the others. "What are you waiting for? You've affected our brand's image and caused such a terrible consequence. Do you think deducting our wages can solve the problem? If there's no way to salvage the situation, the brand's legal staff will come to you within 3 days. Because of your stupid behavior, it has led to such a serious consequence. If the brand's legal department doesn't sue you until you go bankrupt, you won't be able to report back." A bunch of idiots. Hurry up and apologize to Miss G. Think of a way to plead for her. Salvage the brand's loss. Hearing that not only would they be fined, but they would also be sued by the brand's legal staff, the supervisor and employees who were already tense rushed to Jean Wan's side in fright, apologizing profusely. At this moment, the supervisor and employees' attitudes were so servile that they wished they could directly kneel down. The supervisor was the first to step forward to hold Jean Wan's hand, wanting to put herself in her shoes and plead for leniency. Just as the supervisor's hand was about to touch Jean Wan's arm, Feng Ling raised her leg and kicked over a pot of boiling water on the coffee table. The boiling water splashed onto the supervisor's arm, causing her to cry out in pain. She took a large step back, staring in fear at Jean Wan, who remained seated quietly on the sofa with a calm attitude. Seeing this scene, Bai Wei, who was standing by the side, finally realized that Feng Ling's relationship with Jean Wan was not shallow. No wonder she had always felt that someone like Feng Ling was always protecting Jean Wan. From the looks of it, Jean Wan's identity was indeed extraordinary. Even though she was not clear of Jean Wan's identity, she suddenly had a premonition that Ling Feifei's fate would not be good in the future. After the supervisor was scalded, she took several steps back in a panic. Several employees also approached to plead for leniency. Feng Ling's expression was cold, as she was about to stop them from approaching Jean Wan. All of a sudden, CEO Chun and CEO Zhang could no longer watch on. They walked over and berated. "What are you all standing here for? There's no way Miss G will listen to your nonsense. Look for the brand's manager and legal staff to resolve the matter." The mall security guards were sent over to pull away the employees who were kneeling and begging for mercy to prevent them from disturbing Jean Wan. Chapter 218. That's right, that gown. Jean Wan pointed at the silver gown that the model was wearing. "Before your brand leaves this mall, sell this gown to me. How much is it?" The manager and the employees stared at her in shock. They then watched as Jean Wan took out a gold card and handed it to CEO Zhang. "I want that gown. Help me wrap it up." "Thank you. Be careful not to wrinkle it." She actually asked CEO Zhang to run an errand for her. However, CEO Zhang appeared as though he had received a reward. He immediately ordered for the gown Jean Wan wanted to be carefully removed from the model's body. He then ordered for the gown to be wrapped up and delivered to her. "Miss G, the bill for this gown can be transferred to our mall. You don't have to pay." CEO Zhang returned and placed the card in Jean Wan's hand. Jean Wan calmly glanced at CEO Zhang. She gave him face and accepted the card and the gown. However, in the blink of an eye, she handed the gown to Bai Wei, who was behind her. "Sister Bai Wei, this gown suits your skin and aura. It's for you." Jean Wan's attitude was courteous and matter-of-factly. In an instant, not only was Bai Wei shocked, the others present all had different expressions. Ling Feifei stood by the door. She almost crushed her teeth from gritting them. She was clearly the one who tried on this gown first. She was the one who saw it first. But Jean Wan actually bought it. She even gifted it to Bai Wei right in front of her. Jean Wan must be doing this on purpose. After the mall and the store's problems were settled, CEO Chun and CEO Zhang came to ask if Jean Wan had anything else to say. Jean Wan simply said a few words and left. She did not wish to stay here and deal with these people. The weekend wasn't a good time to be wasted here. Seeing that Jean Wan and the others had left, Ling Feifei was afraid that these people would pursue the matter of the zipper. Since there was a problem with the store, no one would think of her for now. Ling Feifei took advantage of the chaos to run out and catch up to them. "Jean Wan, stop right there." Ling Feifei followed behind and called out. She then quickly walked over. When she arrived before Jean Wan, she looked her up and down several times. She glared at her unhappily and asked, "Who exactly are you? How can the person in charge of a small studio invite the general manager and director of such a big shopping mall?" Jean Wan looked straight at her. Her indifferent gaze was focused on the carefully concealed unwillingness and embarrassment on Ling Feifei's face. She calmly said, "It's just studying at T University for 3 months. Is status and family background really that important? Are you sure you want to know the reason? Why don't you rank your roommates as well? Ling Feifei was momentarily speechless. She could only glare at her in secret. But it's wrong of you to lie. Jin Wan could not be bothered to talk nonsense with her. She frowned and said, "Do you still want to see the gown? If you don't want to watch, then go back. I'm tired. The wind is really strong today. It's indeed not good weather for shopping. If you want to continue shopping, you can do so on your own. We'll return to T University first," Bai Wei added. Ling Feifei abruptly turned to look at Bai Wei and then at the gown in her hands that was worth more than 1,000,000 yuan. Even now, she did not dare to imagine that a gown worth more than 1,000,000 yuan would be so generously gifted to Bai Wei. "Jin Wan," Ling Feifei suddenly angrily said, "your surname is Ji. That department store earlier belongs to Hai Cheng's Ji Group. Don't tell me you have some relationship with the Ji family?" Jin Wan calmly glanced at her and did not speak. She was about to flag a taxi to return to T University. Ling Feifei continued, "You're a relative of the Ji family? You were able to open a studio in Haicheng. Don't tell me it's because you're hugging onto the Ji family's thigh. Otherwise, how could there be a place for you in a place like Haicheng where every inch of land is worth its weight in gold?" Feng Ling could no longer watch on. She rubbed her brows by the side. She was really an idiot who deserved a beating. That night, Bai Wei and Jin Wan headed to the bathroom in the dormitory to shower. When they came out to change, they encountered each other in the changing room. Bai Wei asked as she changed, "Jin Wan, you're the daughter of Hai Cheng's Ji family, aren't you?" Jin Wan's actions did not change. She then picked up the hairdryer and turned to look at her. She smiled slightly and used a voice that only she could hear to say, "You can see through it, but don't say it out loud." As expected, it was clear that Jin Wan was just trying to keep a low profile. Ling Feifei refused to believe that Jin Wan's family background was good and would rather believe what she believed. She blindly placed the words Jin Wan's small studio together. But if she thought about it carefully, Jin Wan should be the young miss of the Ji Corporation. Hearing the words "you can see through it, but don't say it out loud," Bai Wei, who had been in the workplace for many years, instantly understood and nodded. It was the weekend. It was already the third week after Jin Wan's birthday. T University's business management classes were almost halfway through. Previously, Jin Wan had brought all of her luggage to the dormitory. However, she had left a power adapter for her laptop in the condo's study. She had forgotten to bring it along. After using the computer last night, Jin Wan searched for it for a long time and recalled that she had left it in the condo. Taking advantage of the weekend, she returned with Feng Ling to retrieve it. By the time they reached the condo, it was already evening. All the floors of the condo were already lit up. "Mrs. M.O." Feng Ling walked behind Jin Wan and softly said, "I previously contacted Shinmu. He said that Mr. M.O. was in Japan for a business trip last week and should have returned in the past 2 days. You and Mr. M.O. haven't contacted each other for almost a month. Are you not planning to take the initiative to give him a call?" Jin Wan's footsteps paused. If Feng Ling had not told her, she would not have known that M.O. Jingshan was in Japan last week. After so long, Jin Wan had grown too accustomed to being by M.O. Jingshan's side. Habit was a scary thing. It was so scary that she thought M.O. Jingshan would always be by her side. However, it was only today that she realized that if one day M.O. Jingshan did not want her anymore, or if M.O. Jingshan chose to disappear from her life, she would not be able to find him. That man's position was too high. As long as he was willing, he could be very, very close to her. If he was unwilling, he could be very, very far away. Jin Wan did not speak and directly entered the condo. When she reached her floor and stepped out of the elevator, she was shocked to find that the door to her condo was actually open. Warm light seeped out from the half-closed door. Feng Ling's face lit up. She was about to ask if Mr. Amo had come when Jin Wan, who had been pretending to be calm, opened the door and quickly walked in. Chapter 219. Jin Wan pushed open the door and entered, looking at the bright lights in the living room. Feng Ling hesitated outside the door. Since Mr. Amo was here, did it mean that she didn't have to accompany Jin Wan tonight? After hesitating for a moment, she decided not to go in. This apartment was really big. The distance from the door to the bedroom was not close, but the bedroom door was closed and there was no light inside. Aside from the living room, only the kitchen light was on. Why was it the kitchen? Would Mo Jingshin really come? Jean Wan felt an inexplicable feeling of homesickness. She had already prepared a lot of things to say. She wanted to say that she had always believed in him. When she said those words, it wasn't because she doubted their relationship and marriage. She was just stuck there for a moment. She directly said what she wanted to say, but she ignored the trust between them that had always existed. These days, she stared at her phone in a daze every day. Her hand always paused on the call button, but she could not press it. Had he finally calmed down? Had he finally come? Jean Wan stood outside the kitchen for a while. She wanted to go in, but was afraid that it would be too sudden. She prepared a plan in her mind before stepping in. However, the moment she entered the kitchen, she saw an auntie in her 50s standing by the refrigerator, holding a shopping bag with a supermarket logo in one hand and opening the refrigerator door with the other. Jean Wan's footsteps paused, and the glimmer of hope in her eyes immediately dissipated. Her hands hidden in her sleeves clenched tightly and then loosened, as though there was something she wanted to hold but could not. The auntie in front of the refrigerator heard footsteps and turned back to see Jean Wan. She was surprised and then asked eagerly and kindly, "Hello, are you Miss G?" Jean Wan restrained her emotions and said, "Yes, and you are?" The auntie immediately smiled again. "Hello, Miss G. I'm Mr. Mo's private nanny hired more than a month ago. I'm responsible for cleaning your room every 2 days and changing all the ingredients in the kitchen to the freshest every day. I noticed that the things in the refrigerator have not been touched for a long time, and you haven't used the various ingredients bought in the past month. After all, Mr. Mo has paid for them long ago, so I still come on time every 2 days." Feng Ling heard the conversation inside from the outside. She didn't hear Mr. Mo's voice and felt it was strange. Was the person inside not Mr. Mo? She quickly walked in and saw Jean Wan standing in front of the kitchen door. She appeared normal, but her back was clearly tense. Feng Ling stepped forward hesitantly. When she raised her eyes to see the auntie inside, she instantly understood what was going on. No wonder this place is always clean. It turns out that people often come here to clean up. Feng Ling said in a low voice, and then turned to see that Jean Wan was also smiling politely, but the smile did not reach her eyes. It was obvious that he was disappointed. "By the way, Miss G, I buy these things every 2 days. Are you not used to them, or have you not been staying here recently? I see that many of the things in your bathroom have not been used in a long time." The auntie closed the fridge door and turned around to ask, "If you're not used to it, you can give me a list. In the future, I'll only buy what you like." "No, it's true that I haven't lived here for a long time." Jean Wan's tone was flat, and she lowered her eyes to look at the clean and spotless floor. Oh, no wonder." The auntie nodded. "It's such a waste to keep the things you buy. If Miss G doesn't come to stay in the condominium, do you need me to send all the food I buy to T University in the future? Are you staying in the dormitory right now? It's not convenient to cook in the dormitory, and the food is also very casual. There's no need to go through so much trouble." Jean Wan calmly said, "Auntie, in the future, just come here on time clean up. There's no need to buy anything. But Mr. Mo gave me a lot of money. It's fine. I just need to clean up." "Miss G, then this money," seeing that Jean Wan was not in a good mood, Feng Ling directly spoke up. "Just do whatever Miss G says. If she says there's no need to buy, then there's no need to buy." The auntie was stunned. She had received so much money, but in the end, she only came to clean up. She truly felt uneasy. However, seeing that they insisted, she could only nod. "All right then, I'll give you my phone number. In these 3 months, if you need anything, feel free to call me." Jean Wan nodded and did not speak anymore. She turned to leave. Feng Ling received a note from the auntie. After glancing at the phone number, she allowed the auntie to continue cleaning. She then turned to look at Jean Wan, who was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. She was silent for a moment and was about to go over to speak to her. However, the auntie in the kitchen rarely saw someone here and kept trying to find a topic to talk about. Feng Ling stood where she was and casually replied. Half an hour later, the Annie left. Jinwan was still standing by the window. Mrs. Mo, you came back to get the computer accessories, right? Feng Ling spoke up to break the silence. Do you still remember where you left them? I'll go get them for you, lest you forget when you leave later. In the study. All right, I'll go get them. Feng Ling glanced at her again before turning to head to the study. In the study, she found the things Jinwan wanted and walked out. At some point in time, Jinwan, who had been standing by the window, had already squatted down. Jinwan squatted by the window and did not make a single sound. Mo. Feng Ling was about to speak when she hesitated for 2 seconds because of the scene before her. She suddenly took out her phone and secretly took a photo of Jinwan from this angle. She took a photo of Jinwan's desolate appearance as she squatted by the window. From this angle, she could not see Jinwan's expression. She could only see a lock of hair hanging by her cheeks. Her back view was thin and quiet. Like a child who had been abandoned by an adult by the side of the road, she did not know what to do. After taking the photo, Feng Ling stared at it for a moment and found Mo Jingshan's private number on her phone. She directly sent the photo to him. After sending it, only 2 seconds later, she saw the words read on the back of the photo. She then placed her phone back and walked to the window to accompany Jinwan as she squatted down. Mrs. Mo, what do you want to do the most right now? Jinwan heard Feng Ling's words and turned to look at the short-haired woman by her side. She pursed her lips. I don't know. My mind is a little empty. Perhaps I can listen to some stories or do something to divert my attention and make myself feel better. Or drinking is not a bad choice. The ancient said that getting drunk can cure 1,000 sorrows. I can give it a try. This was the first time in a month that Jinwan had taken the initiative to admit the pain in her heart. Chapter 220. High City, Mo Corporation. The office door opened. Mo Jingshan had just stepped out when he heard the sound of his phone ringing. CEO Mo, our partner in Hong Kong, has been secretly making some moves. As you expected, they want to use the cooperation with Mo Corporation to be the title sponsor, and then use this opportunity to secretly communicate with other investors. Shenmu walked out of the assistant's office with quick steps. He approached him and reported in a low voice. Mo Jingshan glanced at him and picked up his phone at the same time. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was a message from Feng Ling. The man's slender fingers slid across the screen, and a photo immediately popped up. Then, Shenmu saw Mo Jingshan suddenly stop in front of the office door. He didn't know what he saw on his phone. Shenmu was about to step forward to take a curious look, but before he could see clearly, Mo Jingshan's phone screen had already darkened. What did you say earlier? Mo Jingshan asked. His voice was neither cold nor warm, and it was impossible to tell what he was feeling. Recently, not only was CEO Mo incredibly busy, but he was also traveling all over the country. His originally cold personality had become even more unfathomable. Even Shenmu, who was usually very close to him, had no choice but to speak more carefully. Earlier, I said that the partner in Hong Kong is relying on the cooperation with Mo Corporation and is currently using this opportunity to attract investments from all over the world. They are all using our company's name to attract investments. You've always been dissatisfied with this partner, and you've long expected that they will be very disobedient in private. Should we take this opportunity to head to Hong Kong to intercept those investments, in case it affects Mo Corporation's reputation? Mo Jingshan's expression was as heavy as water, and his gaze was cold and dark. Send the vice CEO to Hong Kong. You'll go with him. You've been paying attention to this matter. Aren't you going personally now? Shenmu was surprised. He had thought that CEO Mo had not been staying in High City recently and would directly head over to Hong Kong this time. Mo Jingshan turned on his phone again, glanced at the photo on the screen, and then instantly turned it off. Book me the earliest flight to T-City. The man's ink-like deep eyes looked toward the partition outside the conference room. The direction the window was facing, 1,000 miles away, was the location of T-City. In the condominium in T-City, Feng Ling took a can of drink from the fridge and handed it to Jinwan. Don't even think about drinking wine. Come, drink something. Jean Wan changed from squatting to hugging her knees and leaning against the window. Seeing the drink Feng Ling brought over, she smiled faintly and took it. She opened it and took a sip. Jean Wan gently squeezed the can in her hand and said in a low and clear voice, "At first, I thought you were a difficult person to approach, but now I realize that a hard block of wood like you actually has a warm side to you. I feel that you are actually quite good at taking care of people, but why do you always appear so distant? Wan Mo Feng Ling also had a can of drink in. She sat beside Jean Wan and sat. Shi Ling Mo and took a Feng Mo Ling Emojis Ling. If you want to tell me, of course I'm willing to listen. It's a good thing that you can help me divert my attention. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep tonight." Jean Wan leaned her back against the window. Although she was smiling, her eyes were clearly depressed. Feng Ling was silent for a moment. After a moment, she said lightly, "I'm an orphan." Jean Wan did not reply. "When I was very young, no one cared about me. In those years, the United States did not care much about a homeless child like me. Later, I met a kind couple. Although they did not have the ability to adopt me, they sent me to a very good welfare home in Los Angeles." Feng Ling's voice was very low, as though this was the first time she was talking to someone about herself. When she analyzed her past, she was still hesitant. She spoke slowly. "The orphanage is not bad, but my personality is not very sociable. I don't like those children who cry all day or act obedient just to eat a piece of meat. So, when I was 13, I sneaked out and disguised myself as a man to sneak into She's training base. At that time, I coincidentally saved a manager of the base, so I was able to sneak in. Later, during puberty, my body was constantly developing. Every day, I wrapped a cloth around my chest and wore loose training clothes to barely cover my body shape that was different from that of a man's. In addition, I was a very indifferent person to begin with. Other than a few of my close friends, I didn't have much contact with others and I didn't act like a woman, so no one ever found out. So, I was always like those men, doing the same tasks and undergoing the same high-intensity training. Later, because of my outstanding training results in all aspects, I gradually gained a foothold in the training base." Hearing this, Jean Wan suddenly smiled. "Then, how were you discovered? You're not disguised as a man." Feng Ling's gaze faltered. After a few seconds of silence, her tone suddenly turned cold. She said coldly, 3 years ago, I was discovered in a field mission. You've hidden for so many years without being discovered. Who is it? Who is so capable?" Jean Wan smiled and held her chin with one hand, turning to look at Feng Ling by her side. To be honest, if Feng Ling cut her hair shorter and wore loose clothes, she would indeed look more heroic than many girls of her age. Nan Hung. Feng Ling clearly did not particularly want to mention this name. Jean Wan was not surprised by this answer. However, when she heard this answer, Jean Wan suddenly took a deep look at Feng Ling. "Last time, during Nan Heng's birthday, we invited you to sit in the private room, but you refused to enter. Was it because of him?" At this point, Feng Ling did not wish to continue speaking. She only glanced at Jean Wan. "Has your attention been diverted by me? Don't worry about whether my attention has been diverted or not. If you get stuck halfway through your story, I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep tonight. There's no continuation of the story. Not now, and not in the future." Feng Ling's expression suddenly became much more indifferent. She stood up and glanced at the time. "Are you planning to stay here tonight or go back to the dormitory? It's getting late. If we don't go back soon, we'll have to go to bed." Jean Wan also glanced at the time. She turned to look out the window. There were tens of thousands of lights, but this condominium was strangely quiet. "Let's go back to the dormitory." Jean Wan stood up and used her hand to knock against her slightly numb legs. She did not speak anymore and directly walked out. Seeing that Jean Wan had left so decisively, it was clear that she did not plan to stay any longer in this condominium. It seemed like no matter what story she told, it would not be able to soothe her mood. Chapter 2:21. Jean Wan rushed back to the dormitory before bedtime. Right now, she could not stay idle. Her mood would be stifled, so the moment she returned, she rushed to take a shower. After showering, she came out to change her clothes. All of a sudden, she saw Bai Wei bring over the gown she had previously gifted her and place it by the cabinet. "What is it?" Jean Wan turned to look at her. "I've placed it on your bed several times before, but you've always taken it back." Bai Wei said, "This gown is too expensive. I still can't accept it. It's enough for you to dampen Ling Fei-Fei's spirit that time. In any case, she hasn't had much of a temper after being suppressed by you recently. This gown should still be returned to you. It's not that I'm trying to dampen anyone's spirit, but this gown really suits your temperament." Jinwan turned around, picking up her own clothes and handing the box of gown back to her. "There's no need to return it to me. In the future, I might be able to cooperate with your company in other areas. This can be considered a revolutionary relationship that we've cultivated in T University. There's no need to treat me like an outsider." Hearing these words, Bai Wei could not help but glance at Jinwan. "I don't know much about Haicheng. I only know that the Ji family is one of the 4 largest families in Haicheng, right?" Jinwan smiled mildly. "You can say that. In recent years, our family's business hasn't been doing so well. I don't think we could be ranked among the 4 largest families. You're really modest, that's the truth. Furthermore, none of the students that Professor Lin accepted this time are ordinary. Everyone carries the future hopes of their respective companies. There's nothing to compare. Just focus on getting through the next 3 months." "That's true. In the future, we'll see each other frequently in the business world. It's better to keep a low profile." The two chatted as they returned to the dormitory. When they entered, Ling Fei-Fei was wearing a facial mask and doing yoga exercises in the dormitory. Of the 4 people in the dormitory, Ling Fei-Fei was definitely the best when it came to skincare and maintenance. Bai Wei was second. Bai Wei was already 25 years old. It was necessary for her to take care of her skin daily, but she was not as exaggerated as Ling Fei-Fei. On the other hand, Jin Wan and Feng Ling were the type who, after washing their faces, would sometimes forget to apply toner on their skin and lie down to sleep. However, Jin Wan's skin was too good. Even though she was usually so casual, her skin was still better than Ling Fei-Fei's, who applied tens of thousands of skincare products every day. Even Feng Ling, who lived a rough life, had whiter skin than Ling Fei-Fei. Seeing that Jin Wan and Bai Wei had entered together, Ling Fei-Fei turned to glance at them while pressing down on her thighs. Gifting a gown worth 1,000,000 yuan is really different. "You even want to take a shower together," Bai Wei glanced at her. "Are you unhappy because someone took your love away from you? Back in that store, when you were facing the bosses of those shopping malls, where did your toughness go? Why didn't I just swipe my card to buy it?" Now, he felt unhappy just thinking about it. So he came to find trouble again? Can't you just stop for a day? Ling Fei-Fei abruptly turned to glare at her. Before she could speak, Jinwan calmly asked, "That day when you tried on the other gown, did you tear the zipper of that gown?" Ling Fei-Fei's expression faltered. She immediately shifted her gaze away, awkwardly, and did not look at them. She angrily sat down by the bed and removed her mask. "That gown wasn't cheap, right?" Bai Wei coldly smiled as she glanced at Ling Fei-Fei. Ling Fei-Fei abruptly glared at Bai Wei. "Why do you care if it was cheap or not? In any case, that branded store has already been removed from the shopping malls. They don't have the right to continue selling there. So what if it's damaged? In any case, they don't dare to ask me for money. Their brand's legal department won't be able to pin the blame on me. Besides, it was so chaotic back then. Who can be sure if it was me who damaged it, or if it was those unlucky employees who helped me put on the gown? Even if you want to testify, it's useless. It's been so many days, but they still haven't come knocking. Who told you it's just words?" Feng Ling, who was about to fall asleep on the bed, suddenly spoke up. Ling Fei-Fei's expression faltered. She turned to see Feng Ling waving the phone screen in her direction. The recording function, which had lasted for a full 2 minutes, had been stopped. In other words, everything Ling Fei-Fei had said earlier had been recorded. "What are you doing? Hurry and delete it." Ling Fei-Fei panicked. She stood up and rushed over to snatch her phone away. It was not that she could not afford it, but she did not want to embarrass herself. She had already embarrassed herself in front of Jean Wan for the past few days. If she were to really be called back to the shopping malls for compensation, where would her face go? Feng Ling casually tossed the phone onto the bed. Her gaze was indifferent as she glanced at Ling Fei, who was pouncing over. She sat up and casually snapped her hands together. The crisp sound of bones crisscrossing could be heard. Ling Fei immediately stood stiffly by her bedside, not daring to move. Her hands froze in midair as she glared angrily at the indifferent and cold Feng Ling. Delete that recording. Otherwise, I'll go find Professor Lin tomorrow and tell him that you were recording in your dormitory. You're violating my right to freedom of speech. Go ahead. I don't mind showing the recording to the professor tomorrow. Feng Ling no longer looked at her. She casually stretched out a leg on the bed, causing Ling Fei to take a small step back in fright. Seeing that Feng Ling was about to lie down and sleep, Ling Fei glared at the phone she had already tossed under the pillow. She was so angry that her teeth were itching. Jinwan returned to the bedside and picked up the phone. Feng Ling, remember to send me a copy of the recording, just in case. Hearing this, Ling Fei abruptly turned to glare at Jinwan. Before she could scold her, Bai Wei also spoke up. Send me a copy as well. Ling Fei abruptly exploded in anger. She casually grabbed a mirror from the bedside table and smashed it harshly onto the ground. In less than a minute, the dormitory management Annie rushed to the door and knocked, scolding, "What time is it? Who caused such a huge commotion?" Ling Fei. The next day, Ling Fei was still angry. She took the opportunity when Jean Wan went to fetch some hot water in the morning to hand over her own water bottle. "Since you're going anyway, isn't your other hand empty? Help me fetch a bottle as well." Ling Fei's attitude was arrogant and bossy. In any case, she was unwilling to be suppressed by Jean Wan's aura. Jean Wan did not even look at her and had already left. Ling Fei abruptly stood up and was about to force her own water bottle into Jean Wan's hand. However, the moment she stood up, Feng Ling, who was passing by, kicked the empty water bottle in her hand onto the ground. What are you doing?" Ling Fei saw that Jean Wan had already left without looking back. She then glanced at the broken water bottle on the ground and abruptly raised her eyes to glare at Feng Ling. "If you want to drink water, pour it yourself. If you want to fetch water, go fetch it yourself. Who are you hoping to serve you?" After kicking her, Feng Ling turned and sat down, her tone cold and disdainful. "What are you doing? You've been protecting Ji Wan ever since you came here. Don't tell me you're the bodyguard she hired. You won't let her do anything." Ling Fei was angry. She really could not stay in this dormitory any longer. "You're right. I'm her bodyguard." Feng Ling narrowed her eyes and sneered. Chapter 222. The next afternoon, there were many cars parked outside T University. None of them looked simple. The students were whispering among themselves, saying that the 2-century-old libraries in T University were about to be renovated. The person who came today was the CEO of a well-known company in the country. He was going to invest in the renovation of T University's library. In the past, investors like this would eventually become honorary principals. This time was likely no exception. If the investment was successful, he would definitely become an honorary principal. After all, T University's library had a history of close to 100 years. Regardless of whether it was tens of millions or hundreds of millions of books, or the ancient building, if it needed to be renovated, it would require a huge investment. This was not something an ordinary company could afford. Hey, have you guys heard? The person who's going to renovate T University's library seems to be from High City. High City? High City is one of the top cities in the country. There are indeed many rich people there. Many well-known corporations in the country have their headquarters in High City. It's no surprise that the other party has such a strong financial strength. Indeed, I wonder which company CEO is it? Renovating T University's century-old library is a feat that can be recorded in history. Furthermore, it's free of charge. I'm really curious who's so generous. Although they're generous, it's not that simple to say that they're doing it for free. T University is definitely one of the top universities in the country. Due to the huge amount of work required, the century-old library has never been renovated. Now that it's being renovated, it will definitely be widely publicized in the country. Regardless of which company the other party is from, in the future, T University and the various universities in the country, including the education industry, will definitely be implicated. The benefits this will bring are all unimaginable. That's right. How can we easily guess the thoughts of those who stand at the top? Today, such soft discussions could be heard everywhere in T University, especially among the business and corporate management students. The discussions were even more heated. In the afternoon, Jean Wan was in a rush to read through Professor Lin's test questions and did not eat anything. In the afternoon, during the break, she went to the cafeteria to buy some food. Along the way, she overheard the group's discussion. When she heard that the investor was from High City, she subconsciously glanced out of the cafeteria's window toward T University. She couldn't see the cars parked outside from this distance, so she just glanced at them and walked out with the food she had just bought. Haicheng was indeed the most prosperous city in the country, and it was also a gathering place for talented people. There were many famous and wealthy groups there, and T-City was also an educational institution on par with Peking University and Tsinghua University in the country. It was not impossible for a big shot from an investment group to suddenly have an interest in the education industry. In the evening, the day's classes ended. Bai Wei said that she had a friend she had worked with in the past to meet and invited the two of them out to relax. The three of them brought their books back to the dormitory and changed their clothes. Just as they were about to leave, Ling Feifei suddenly ran in. After entering the room, she began to search for clothes and hurriedly searched for various skincare products and cosmetics. It was as though she was in a hurry to go on a date or meet someone important. "Why are you all looking at me?" As Ling Feifei swiftly powdered her face, she glanced at them from the corner of her eyes. "You've also returned to change?" Does she also want to have a chance encounter with President Mo? Usually, all of you don't look like much, but when it comes to it, all of you are even faster than me. When Jin Wan and Feng Ling heard the words President Mo, their expressions changed slightly. However, Bai Wei looked at Ling Feifei as though she was crazy. "What President Mo? What chance encounter? It's cold tonight. We just came back to change our jackets before heading out." Ling Feifei clearly did not believe Bai Wei's words. "Who are you trying to fool? Based on your abilities, you should have already heard that the library's investor is High City's MO Corporation. The president of MO Corporation is personally visiting our T University. Many of the girls who boast about their beauty have returned after class to change and put on makeup, hoping to catch a glimpse of President MO before he leaves. That's the MO Corporation we're talking about. If we can have a romantic encounter with President MO, if we can sit in his car, or even have dinner together, just thinking about it makes me excited." Bai Wei was stunned. Of course, she had heard of the MO Corporation. Her company had applied to work with the Mo Corporation several times, but all of them had been rejected. This company was an unreachable planet to many corporations in the country. Although the MO Corporation had many partners in the country and had many subsidiary companies, the MO Corporation's main focus was not on T-City. Furthermore, they did not have much contact with the education industry. Why would they suddenly invest so much money to rebuild T University's library? Although this would bring about many profitable paths for the education industry, with the MO Corporation's solid strength and the MO family's foundation, the education industry in the country could not compare to the MO Corporation's original investment prospects. Why would they suddenly involve themselves in this area? Bai Wei was still in a daze when she suddenly heard a pong sound from the dormitory door. She turned to see that for some reason, Jin Wan had suddenly walked out with quick steps. "Jin Wan!" Bai Wei thought that something had happened and rushed to open the door to look outside. She saw that Jin Wan was walking quickly without turning back, as though she had something urgent to attend to. Feng Ling's expression was calm and indifferent as she walked out. She calmly said, "I'll go take a look." Jin Wan walked out of the dormitory and headed straight for the school building. Those few words kept repeating in her mind. CEO, MO, C-O-M-O, C-O-M-O. Usually, whenever there were meetings or important matters, they would be held at the top floor of the school building. Jinwan's footsteps were fast. Even Feng Ling took a long time to catch up to her. The school building had over 10 floors. The elevator at the end of the corridor did not allow students to use it without permission. Jinwan took the stairs step by step and finally reached the top floor. She turned to see that the lights in the principal's conference room were indeed lit. "Your T University students? Who allowed you to come to the school's office? Don't you know that students are forbidden from entering this floor?" T University's dean walked out from the office by the side. When he saw Jinwan and Feng Ling, he immediately furrowed his brows and reprimanded them in dissatisfaction. However, Jinwan's gaze was directed toward the principal's conference room. "What are you looking at? Why aren't you going down?" the dean urged with a cold expression. The door to the conference room was tightly shut. Only the light from inside could be seen. "May I ask when the meeting inside will end?" Although the dean's attitude was not good, Jinwan still tried her best to ask politely. Chapter 223. Coincidentally, at this moment, Professor Lin came out of the conference room. The moment he saw Jinwan, he was surprised. "Jinwan, why are you here?" Jinwan looked back and saw Professor Lin hurriedly coming toward her. "Just in time. I was planning to go back to my office to get the materials for the business management and business management courses. The school leaders and investors are going to inspect our department. Help me get them. The materials are all on my desk. Go through them carefully and send them directly to the conference room after you get them." Professor Lin was very confident in Jinwan. After instructing her, he rushed back to the conference room. Jinwan only hesitated for a second before turning to head down the stairs. Feng Ling was a temporary transfer student, and her mind was not focused on business management. She did not know much about the materials Professor Lin needed. Jinwan searched the office alone for about 10 minutes. After arranging all the materials Professor Lin needed, she placed them into a folder and brought them to the top floor of the school building. Seeing that she had really brought them over and that Professor Lin had personally instructed Jinwan to bring the materials in, the dean did not stop her. He stepped forward to open the conference room door. Before Jinwan entered, he warned, "Don't speak carelessly in there. It's rare for the school leaders to gather together, as well as the library's investors. Remember, don't speak carelessly." "Jinwan, I understand. Thank you." After entering, the voices of the school leaders could be heard in the conference room. The moment Jinwan entered, she saw the man seated at the head of the conference table. Today, the man was not wearing a suit. He wore a simple shirt and black pants. His 188-meter-tall figure was extremely eye-catching as he sat there quietly. His aura was quiet and reserved, and he appeared distant. In terms of looks, figure, and even the calm and indifferent aura he exuded, even the school leaders and principals present, as well as those who were used to standing on high ground, were silently crushed by him. He was like a silent and disdainful person. That cold and slight smile clearly hid a clear alienation and indifference. Jinwan looked at this man whom she had always been familiar with, but at this moment, he suddenly seemed like a stranger. Her heart was instantly stung by bees. She was too used to M.O. Jingshan's doting and giving in to her. This M.O. Jingshan, who caused her to feel distant, really did seem a little unfamiliar. "President M.O., this is the scope of our T University's cooperation with various major educational institutions in the country in recent years. This includes the education industry." The school leaders were standing in front of a huge screen and pointing at a PowerPoint presentation, detailing the various indicators of T University. The school leaders, who were used to domineering in front of the students, were now looking at the man sitting at the head of the conference table with sparkling eyes. Not only did T University's century-old library need to be rebuilt, but there were also various areas and channels related to the education industry that they hoped would be seen by local businessmen. Right now, they really wanted to seize the opportunity to cooperate with the MO Corporation in the education industry, so they had to use all their means to attract the attention of investors. The ongoing meeting did not stop because of Jinwan's appearance. The school leader only glanced at Jinwan. When he saw Professor Lin stand up and signal for Jean Wan to come over, he understood her intentions. The meeting continued without a pause. Jean Wan, come here. Professor Lin was a special professor at T University. He sat in the middle of the left side of the conference table, about 7 to 8 meters away from the head of the conference table. He beckoned Jean Wan over. Jean Wan brought the materials in her hands to Professor Lin. When she handed the folder to him, Professor Lin flipped through it and nodded in praise. He then turned back to look at her approvingly. Not bad. As expected, you're the most diligent in your studies. You brought all of my materials here without missing a single page. If it were someone else, who knows how many pages they would have missed. Jean Wan felt that her mission was over. She used her gaze to ask the professor if she should leave now. Professor Lin did not reply. At this moment, the school leader happened to be speaking to him. He turned his head and entered the meeting state, not saying whether Jean Wan should leave or not. Jean Wan stood behind the professor. She raised her eyes and looked toward the head of the conference table. Ever since she entered, Mo Jingshin had only glanced at her once. It was a very ordinary glance, and he had not shifted his gaze toward her since. When she glanced toward him again, she saw that Mo Jingshin was currently reading a T University file that the school leader had eagerly handed to him. He was calmly flipping through it. His calm and indifferent attitude quickly made Jean Wan realize that his attention was not placed on her. This man was really cold, unlike Jean Wan. Although she appeared calm on the surface, her heart felt as though it had been scratched by a cat. It was painful, itchy, and stinging. Unfortunately, the person she was facing was a man who was much more skilled than her. As though sensing her gaze, Mo Jingshin only took a few glances before placing the file down. His indifferent gaze finally landed on her. The moment their eyes met, Jean Wan's footsteps, which were about to leave the conference room, paused. She was not very clear about Mo Corporation's plans for this year. Perhaps Mo Jingshin's appearance at T University and his involvement in the education industry was part of their company's original plan. He had not bothered with her for a month. It couldn't be that his sudden appearance here was because of her. Back then, she had indeed said something she should not have. Her distrust had crossed his bottom line, but it had been an entire month. What exactly had he been doing this entire month? After not seeing her for a month, this man's posture was really at ease. Professor Lin's student came in to deliver the documents. If you're done, then leave. Seeing that Jean Wan was still standing there, and that CEO Mo's attention seemed to be attracted by her, the principal suddenly spoke up, urging her to leave quickly. At this moment, Professor Lin also turned back to nod his thanks at Jean Wan, indicating with his eyes that she could leave first. Jean Wan silently nodded. From start to finish, she did not say a single word. She turned and walked out. Behind her, a school leader's voice came. That's right, CEO Mo. You previously mentioned that the reason you invested in T University's century-old library was because there is someone very important to you here. Regardless of whether it is to you or to that person, this is truly a matter of great virtue. I wonder who exactly is it that you value so highly, CEO Mo? The author's words. Chapter 224. The moment Jean Wan arrived at the conference room, her expression froze. That day, she should not have been so conflicted over the matter. She should not have doubted and distrusted him. At that time, she really wanted to ask if she had left any traces on this blank piece of paper. Right now, could this be considered a form of indirect response? Was she very important? At the same time, Jean Wan felt a familiar gaze from behind her. She stood in the same spot. She knew that this was the principal's conference room and that there were many school leaders present. She calmed herself down and quickly walked out. Feng Ling had been waiting for her outside. When she saw Jean Wan come out, she immediately approached her. She used her gaze to ask if the person inside was Mr. Mo.G. Wan only nodded her head and went downstairs. The sky had already darkened. T-City's lanterns had just been lit, and the streetlights on T University's campus were somewhat far away. Jean Wan said that she wanted to be alone for a while. Feng Ling found a spot far away where she would not disturb her. She watched as Jean Wan paced back and forth on the field behind the campus. It was unknown what she was thinking about. About an hour later, the sky was getting darker and darker. Only the top floor of the teaching building was lit. Jean Wan suddenly noticed that the lights in the conference room on the top floor had been turned off. She abruptly walked in through the back door. She saw that several school leaders had just come down and that Professor Lin was behind her. She approached to ask, "Professor, has the meeting ended? It's already past 8. You haven't returned to the dormitory yet?" Professor Lin looked at her in shock. "The wind is very strong tonight. Go back and rest early. Don't catch a cold." Has everyone gone downstairs? Jean Wan did not see Mo Jingshan's figure. The investor has left. The school leaders and I extended the meeting by several minutes. Right now, the conference room is empty. Why? Who are you looking for? Professor Lin sized her up. Your father and I are old acquaintances, but I've been too busy these past few years. I don't know much about your G family's matters. CEO Mo is also from High City. Could it be that you guys... He has already left? Jean Wan furrowed her brows. She did not deny Professor Lin's guess. Her words could be considered as a silent admission. Professor Lin immediately glanced at her again. He recalled that Mo Jingshan had specifically asked to look at T University's business management major. It seemed like it was not a coincidence, so it was because of Jean Wan. Professor Lin smiled. He just left not long ago. If you want to chase after him now, he probably just left the school gate. There's a traffic jam outside the school gate now, so his car shouldn't have left yet. After saying that, Professor Lin left without going overboard. He had no right to ask about the matters of young people, but because of Jean Wan's existence, T University was able to attract such a large investor. This was truly a great contribution from Jean Wan to T University and the library. Jean Wan's reaction was to hesitate for 2 or 3 seconds before she suddenly turned and walked out. She ran all the way to the school gates and saw the cars parked outside. However, she did not know which one was Mo Jingshan's. He didn't drive his ghost to T-City. There was a subsidiary company of the Mo Corporation in T-City. He didn't know which company car or his spare car was. He had seen him drive a black off-road vehicle before, but that black off-road vehicle wasn't here. Jean Wan looked at the parking lot outside the school and finally could not help picking up her cell phone to call Mo Jingshan. The call went through, but after a long time, no one picked up. In the end, the call was automatically hung up. After a long time, Jean Wan did not hear any of the nearby cars ringing. In other words, Mo Jingshan had already left. He left just like that. Jean Wan did not give up and called again, but no one picked up. She abruptly gripped her cell phone tightly in her palm, glaring at each car in the parking lot. Very good. Mo Jingshan, your temper is really bad. Jean Wan turned and walked back. Feng Ling saw that Jean Wan did not seem to be able to find Mr. Mo and walked over from a distance. However, she saw Jean Wan's unhappy expression. Feng Ling saw that there were no other students around and softly said, "Mrs. Mo, are you sure the person who came today is Mr. Mo? Where is he?" "I don't know." Hearing Jean Wan's resentful tone, Feng Ling, by way, went out alone tonight and met up with several friends she had interacted with in the workplace. When she returned, she was in a good mood and brought a few cans of beer with her. She knew that Jean Wan did not drink, so she originally planned to drink with her. However, for the first time ever, Jean Wan took 2 cans of beer from her bed. She sat down and began to drink, as though she was competing with the beer. Is what's wrong with her? Bai Wei was astonished. She turned to look at Feng Ling in confusion. Feng Ling calmly replied, "She's probably angered. Who has the ability to anger her to this extent? Also, didn't she say that she can't drink? Should we try to persuade her? Forget it. Let her drink. After drinking, she can have a good sleep in the dormitory. There's no point in stopping her now." Feng Ling glanced at Jean Wan. If she really wanted to drink right now, she could understand her feelings. As long as she did not step out of the dormitory tonight, she could drink however she wanted. Bai Wei saw that Jean Wan had already finished the 2 cans of beer and turned to look at the other 2 cans in her bag. "Aren't you guys going to drink?" Jinwan's alcohol tolerance was not very good. She had only drunk 2 cans of beer with a low alcohol content, but her eyes were already slightly red. I bought the alcohol on the way. I only bought 4 cans. If you really want to drink to your heart's content, why don't we go to the bar opposite T University to drink together? Bai Wei saw that Ling Fei was not around tonight. It was a rare opportunity for the 3 of them to drink and chat together. She directly suggested, that bar's management is not bad. There aren't any messy people. There are only 2 resident singers who sing all sorts of sad love songs. I've been there twice. Their singing is not bad, and the environment is good. There's also a wide variety of alcohol. All right, let's go. Jinwan picked up the 3rd can of beer, opening it as she spoke. Seeing that Jinwan's mood was clearly heightened due to the alcohol, Feng Ling directly said, "No, it's already past 9. Let's just drink a few cans in the dormitory. After drinking, we'll sleep." However, Jinwan appeared as though she did not hear Feng Ling's words. She had already picked up her coat and put it on. She then sat by the bed to change her shoes. As she tied her shoelaces, she said, let's go. My treat." As she spoke, she glanced at Feng Ling, who clearly did not intend to let her go. "Let's go together. You'll follow me. What are you afraid of?" How could Feng Ling be afraid? If Jinwan really wanted to go out, nothing would happen if she followed Jinwan. Furthermore, in the past month, she did not know what Mr. Mo had done to the Su family in America. They had quietened down and would likely not extend their hands to Jinwan. What Feng Ling was worried about was not Jinwan's safety, but that Jinwan had already drunk alcohol. If Mr. Mo was nearby and did not leave, if Mr. Mo knew that Jinwan had drunk alcohol. Chapter 225. If you're in a bad mood, go out and relax. It's the same even if you don't drink. It's just relaxing. Bai Wei saw that the 2 of them were in a deadlock and decided to smooth things over. You're a woman. No matter what you do, you have to be able to face yourself. Don't take things too hard. It's good to go out and take a walk. It's much better than holding it all in. Jinwan lowered her head and tied her shoelaces. She did not speak, but it was clear that she was indeed holding it in. Feng Ling's relationship with Jinwan was likely getting closer and closer. There were many things that she could empathize with. Even though she remembered CEO Mo's instructions, she truly felt that Jinwan's current mood needed to be released. She had indeed held it in for a month. Today, it could be said that her emotions had been triggered. Then go. I'll accompany you. You mustn't drink anymore. You've already drunk 3 cans. Feng Ling sighed slightly. However, the result was that Feng Ling had underestimated the waiters in a place like Leisure Bar. Even though Bai Wei and Jinwan had originally only ordered a fruit plate and a bottle of fruit wine with a low alcohol content, they could not resist the recommendations of these people. In the end, they bought several bottles of wine that were said to be fruit-flavored, 1 red and 1 blue. Although they appear to be fruit-flavored wines, the alcohol content was not particularly low. The result of mixing several types of wine together was easy to imagine. With Jinwan's alcohol tolerance, in less than an hour, she closed her eyes and leaned against the sofa, unmoving. Feng Ling went to support her. Bai Wei sat by the side and sighed. No wonder Jinwan said that there was someone at home who did not allow her to drink. As expected, her alcohol tolerance is too poor. Alcohol tolerance can be considered one of her weaknesses. Tomorrow, when she wakes up, don't laugh at her. Otherwise, based on her recent mood, it's very easy for her heart to shatter into pieces. Feng Ling saw Jinwan's drunken appearance and half teased and half helplessly helped her up. Bai Wei also had a teasing smile. Is this a relationship problem? Ah, I've seen it many times. Women who are usually so impressive in the workplace, once they encounter a relationship problem, they all become like this. I can understand. I definitely won't laugh at her. Feng Ling did not continue speaking with her. She supported Jinwan and turned to walk out. Jinwan was really drunk, and it was the first time she was drunk to this extent. She was like a puddle of mud and had to be supported by Feng Ling to steady herself. This bar was located in the basement. They needed to take the elevator to reach it. She had just helped Jean Wan to the elevator when Jean Wan clutched her chest and leaned her head against Feng Ling's shoulder. Her expression was distressed as she said, "I've never seen a man with such a temper. Feng Ling, if he doesn't want to care about me anymore, then don't come to T-City." Feng Ling, he still ignores me after coming to T-City. I've already called him, but he won't pick up. He wasn't going to take it. He must have been sitting in one of the cars. Feng Ling, why don't we have a quarrel if you dare? You're giving me the cold shoulder. Do you really think that just because I always feel that I'm in the wrong, I'll soften my temper and cling to you? Did he think he was the Buddha? Did he think that I, Jean Wan, was a monkey in his palm that would never be able to escape and that everything was under his control? Let me tell you, I jumped out of my previous life. Feng Ling, right now, Feng Ling could not be bothered with Jean Wan's incoherent drunken words. She could only silently watch the elevator doors that had been open for half a minute. Her scalp turned numb as she stared at the tall and broad man inside. Jean Wan realized that the elevator doors had opened, but Feng Ling had yet to pull her in. She narrowed her eyes and absent-mindedly saw a man standing inside. She narrowed her eyes and moved closer to take a look. Feng Ling subconsciously rushed to help her in. Jean Wan still staggered and almost fell into the elevator. Feng Ling rushed to hold her back. Mrs. Mo. However, as Jean Wan was being supported, she raised her eyes to look at the man in the elevator. From this distance, the man in front of her was truly handsome to the point of causing one's hair to stand on end. Did she really drink too much? The man who previously refused to talk to her, refused to see her, and refused to pick up her calls seemed to be standing right in front of her. Jean Wan looked at the man in front of her, who was as tall as a jade tree. His eyes were cold, his nose was high, and his face was so handsome that it was like the work of the gods. His lower body was still clad in black trousers, which were long and slender. He wore a pure white shirt that was not fully buttoned, revealing his collarbone. He was sexy and exuded an aura of abstinence, causing one to be mesmerized. He just stood there, cold, noble, and distant. As Jean Wan continued to stare at him drunkenly, the man just coldly lifted his eyelids, lightly swept his gaze over the coat Jean Wan was wearing, and finally stopped on her face. His gaze was unreasonably calm, deep and calm. He just stared at her. Jean Wan's coat was put on by Feng Ling, where she pulled her up from the sofa. Right now, it looked a little messy. Her hair was also loose and tangled around her neck, making her skin look fairer and more delicate. Her cheeks were also much redder from the alcohol. Mr. Mo, Feng Ling supported Jean Wan with some awkwardness. She did not expect that after accompanying Jean Wan to indulge for the first time, she would be caught by Mo Jingshin. It seemed like Mo Jingshin had always been watching Jean Wan's every move. In this month, no matter where Jean Wan was or what she was doing, even if Feng Ling did not report it, he would still know. The man coldly stood in the elevator and did not speak. Mrs. Mo's feelings had been suppressed for a month. Today you finally came, but your attitude dug out all the pain in her heart. About her drinking today, Feng Ling was explaining when Jean Wan suddenly turned to look at Feng Ling. She tilted her head and looked at her, saying unhappily, "Feng Ling, why don't you pretend to be a man again after I jump out of Mo Jingshin's palm? How about marrying you? Anyway, you're so handsome and skilled. Why don't we make do with each other?" Feng Ling. In an instant, Jean Wan was directly thrown into the arms of the man in the elevator by Feng Ling. Her feet were unsteady, and her nose bumped against the man's chest. She immediately frowned in pain and raised her hand to tug at the man's clothes. She grabbed the corner of his clothes with both hands and struggled to stand firm. Then she raised her hand to rub her nose and turned to look at Feng Ling. "Feng Ling, why did you push me?" Feng Ling looked at Jean Wan, who was now really drunk and unconscious, and her back tightened because of Mo Jingshin's displeased and cold eyes. She lowered her voice and said, "Mrs. Mo, if you're drunk, quickly close your eyes and sleep. Don't talk." Chapter 226. As Jean Wan spoke, She reached behind her, muttering, "I can't stand properly right now. Feng Ling, come and support me. It's not good to keep leaning on someone else." Jinwan was so drunk that she could not be stopped. What did she mean by someone else? Right now, she was leaning on her husband, Emo Jingshun. But right now, she was seriously drunk. Her alcohol tolerance was poor to begin with, and she drank so much tonight. Jinwan had most likely never drunk so much in her entire life. Feng Ling? Seeing that Feng Ling did not speak, Jinwan could only prop herself up and turn around to pull her up. The moment she turned around, she could not stand properly. Her legs weakened, and she fell to the side, knocking into the man beside her. Almost at the same time, her waist was held down by the man's arm. In an instant, his breath entered Jinwan's nose. It was a clear and clean scent that she was familiar with. She barely managed to hold onto his clothes. She lowered her head to look at his elegant white shirt and well-ironed trousers. She muttered, "Sorry, I drank too much. I couldn't stand properly." As she spoke, she tried to move away from his embrace. However, the man did not let go. His cold eyes stared at her. He watched her drunken little face and pressed her firmly into his embrace. "Sir, I'm very sorry." Jinwan thought that she had hurt him, and that was why he did not let go of her. She quickly apologized. After speaking, she turned to speak to Feng Ling. "Feng Ling, did you not drink tonight? Let's head back to the dormitory. Why isn't Bai Wei with us? Did she fall asleep on the sofa?" Feng Ling thought in her heart, "You should worry about yourself first. Bai Wei isn't drunk. She'll be back in a while." Feng Ling replied to prevent Jinwan from persistently asking. Jinwan nodded. She did not notice when the elevator doors closed. When the elevator doors opened again, she saw that Feng Ling had suddenly turned around to leave. She actually had no intention of accompanying her back. "Hey, where are you going?" Before Jinwan could follow him out, she lost her balance and was pulled back by the man behind her. The moment she bumped into his embrace, Jinwan turned back with a confused expression. She subconsciously smiled at him. "Thank you." As she spoke, she was about to push him away. She had to catch up with Feng Ling recently. Feng Ling had been inseparable from her. Something must have happened for her to suddenly leave alone in the middle of the night. She felt that she had to follow up to take a look. However, after struggling for a long time, she could not escape from his embrace. Jinwan was about to speak when she abruptly heard the man's calm voice ring by her ears. "Stand firm." Jinwan was startled and turned to look at him. However, before she could see clearly, the man brought her out of the elevator. Jinwan was slightly dazed. She wanted to struggle, but could not. She could only think that this person was too similar to Mo Jingshin. The night breeze outside the bar was slightly chilly. Jinwan was brought into the car by the man. Her head leaned against the car window weakly. The car door was already locked. She struggled futilely against the window, muttering softly, "I'm telling you, kidnapping is against the law. Hurry and let me out of the car, or else my Feng Ling won't let you off." The man did not speak and had already started the car. Jinwan's eyes were half closed. Her head hurt, and she wanted to sleep. However, she was afraid that she would be kidnapped again. She tried her best to maintain a sliver of consciousness to pay attention to the environment outside the car. However, her vision was blurry, and she could not see anything clearly. It was only when the car stopped at the condominium near T University that she looked out in astonishment. Right now, even the human traffickers knew so much about her. He even knew where the condominium she rarely stayed in was. "I want to return to the dormitory. I don't want to return here." Jinwan furrowed her brows. Her hand slammed hard against the car window. "I don't want to return here. I don't want to." However, the car door had already opened. The man unbuckled her seatbelt and lowered his eyes to look at her. His voice was low and cold. "If you don't want to return here, where do you want to go? In any case, I'm not going back here." The moment Jinwan thought back to the luggage she saw when she returned that day, her heart was filled with anger. "You want me to bring you back to the dormitory? I'll go back to the dormitory myself. It's not up to you. Get out." Jinwan was about to say no when the man had already gotten out of the car and walked around the car. He opened the door and carried her out. Jinwan raised her hand to push him away, but it was as though the man completely knew what she was going to do next. No matter if she suddenly raised her arm or leg, he was able to accurately avoid them. At the same time, he pressed her down and locked her firmly in his embrace. Jinwan raised her eyes to glare at him. The wind outside the car was slightly chilly. For a second, her mind was clear. Suddenly, she saw the man's face clearly. Because she was in his embrace, she could smell the man's cool and stern scent. She stopped moving. Was it a dream? Or a hallucination? Didn't he refuse to pick up her calls? But right now, how could Jinwan care about that? The moment she saw the man clearly, she raised her hand to push him away. Go away. The man lowered his head, one hand supporting the back of her head to prevent her from falling back. His other hand threaded through her hair. His voice was soft and gentle, but also like an unhappy warning. Behave yourself. Jinwan pretended not to hear him and pushed him again. In the end, he suddenly carried her horizontally. Her entire body was lifted up by his waist. The moment her feet were in the air, she instinctively cried out. Her two hands clung tightly to his neck. Then she heard the man's low chuckle. However, this chuckle did not sound happy or angry. It was as though he was always aware of her trump card. Without much effort, he easily subdued her, who was as drunk as mud, and even forced her to cling to his body. You'd rather squat by the window like a wronged cat than make a call to say that you miss me. Mrs. Imo, you're really stubborn. The man's deep, calm, and dark eyes watched her. He said coldly with a forced smile, in the afternoon, you stood in the school's conference room and peeked at me. While I was visiting the subsidiary company, you were able to drink yourself into this state. You're really taking advantage of the fact that I can't hit or scold you. Even when I was angry, I couldn't bear to leave you hanging. You've got me, haven't you? Jinwan's hands were wrapped around his neck. Subconsciously, she was afraid of falling. Hearing his words, she immediately glared at him. She did not care if he was hallucinating or real. She said angrily, "Who says I'm wronged? I eat well and sleep well into university. I don't feel wronged at all." The night was cold and windy. Mo Jingshun did not say anything more to the stubborn, drunken little woman in his arms. He directly carried her into the condo. Chapter 227. Was this the real Mo Jingshun or something else? This dream was a little too realistic. She stood up out of habit, swaying as she stood by the sofa. She raised her head to look at the man who was a head taller than her. Was it a dream? As she spoke, she reached out to pinch the man's face. Mo Jingshun did not dodge. However, just as her hand was about to touch his face, he caught it with one hand and pulled it down. He held it in his hand and used his strength to support her, preventing her from falling back. And it's a dream. The man's voice was low and cold. She could not hear his emotions. Jinwan stood in front of him, widening her drunken eyes as she tried her best to look at him. After staring for a long time, she suddenly smiled. Forget it, forget it. Who cared if it was a dream or an illusion? In any case, it wasn't the real Mo Jingshun. She could scold him however she wanted. It was just an illusion. He definitely wouldn't mind. Mo Jingshun. Jinwan's temper immediately flared up. She planned to show off her might to the illusion in front of her and vent out the anger she had accumulated over the past month. She suddenly pointed at his nose, raising her drunken little face and misty eyes to glare at him. You tortoise bastard. The man's handsome brows rose slightly. You know how to scold people? What do you mean I know how to scold people? In the past, when this old lady quarreled with others and scolded them, you didn't see it. Why do all the rich young ladies in Hai Chung hate me so much? Isn't it because back then, they all came to provoke me and ended up being scolded until their eyes turned red? It's not like you don't know what kind of personality I had in the past. Jinwan abruptly stood on her tiptoes, raising her hand to tug on his collar. She pursed her lips and began her long journey of venting her frustrations. For you, I nearly pulled out all the thorns on my body. For our marriage, I worked hard to do everything. I've never doubted you. The night before, I was frightened in the underground bar. My panic turned to despair. It was all because of that person I didn't know. The night after, I found out that it was all because of your ex-fiancé. Was I supposed to smile and say it's fine, that I didn't mind? Do you think I have no conscience? Let me tell you, if I, Jean Wan, did not have a conscience, I would never stick to you like this in this lifetime. So what if it's a divorce? I can go far away, but I've staked everything I have on you, Mo Jingshin. I've given you everything. My everything. My everything. You are indeed unconditionally good to me, but apart from that, you are an abyss that I can't even touch. I don't even know how far away I am from your heart. The wound on Jean Wan's forehead had long healed. Her forehead, which was covered by her bangs, was smooth and clean. It was impossible to tell what she had experienced in the underground bar a month ago. The man's hand brushed aside her slightly sweaty bangs. She suddenly turned her head and bit down on his finger. As she bit down, she thought that it was a dream anyway. It didn't hurt, and neither did he. She had vented all her anger. She had scolded him, and tomorrow she would be a good man again. He didn't struggle free. Instead, he reached out an arm to steady her body and let her bite him. The taste of blood overflowed from her mouth. Jinwan finally stopped. She suddenly muttered softly, as though she was muttering to herself, "I should have changed my life from the very beginning. I must have lost my mind. Otherwise, why would I willingly submit to the seed you drew and be blocked by a man like you who is addicted to poppies? I'm wrong because I can't control my heart calmly. I'm wrong because I care too much about you, right? You." The back of Jinwan's head was held. The man's lips pressed down, blocking her lips. Jinwan was stunned. Just as she was about to step back, the hand on the back of her head firmly restrained her. The force that restrained her was not gentle. Although it could not be said to be rough, it was much stronger than usual. She was really too drunk. After struggling for a while, she felt tired. The pain and numbness on her lips did not allow her to react. How could there be such a clear sensation in a dream? After that, she fell asleep in a daze. She didn't even know how she fell asleep. Jinwan did not sleep well. In less than half an hour, she had a bunch of messy nightmares. She frowned and suddenly opened her eyes in shock. The glaring light in the room made her close her eyes again. However, just a glance was enough for her to clearly see the man's handsome face. She realized that she seemed to be lying on the sofa. Mo Jingshin was still there in her dream. "You're awake? Do you have a headache?" The man's voice fell by her ear. Hearing this voice, which was frighteningly real, Jean Wan's eyelashes trembled. She opened her misty eyes again and looked at the man's face in a trance. She reached out to touch his face to see if the illusion would suddenly disappear. When she reached out, the man's palms suddenly held her waist. Jean Wan was brought to sit on his lap. She pressed her head against his shoulder. She tried to sit up, but her head still drooped little by little on his shoulder. "Mo Jingshun," she said softly, "and in the future, let's not quarrel, all right?" Jean Wan buried her face in his neck. Her voice was low and soft. The man's hand paused on the top of her head. After a moment, he looked at her mildly. "Are you sober or still drunk? Can you recognize if I'm an illusion or if I'm your husband?" Jean Wan buried her face deeper into his neck. "I don't know." Mo Jingshin narrowed his eyes and looked at her unkindly. He raised his hand to encircle the little woman who had vented her anger with the help of the alcohol. He said indifferently, "Then let's talk when you're sober." "I don't talk to drunkards." Jean Wan. She abruptly tried to leave his lap, but the man held her down and did not let her move. "You're so drunk, yet you still have the strength to struggle. It seems like the 1 month I gave you wasn't enough time to calm down. Earlier, you said you wouldn't quarrel, but now you're keeping a distance with me with a dark face? Let go of me. I want to go down. Reason, you." Jean Wan raised her half-drunk and half-sober eyes. Her slightly disheveled hair stuck to her cheeks. Her earlier resentful expression was now tinged with awkwardness. Her lips moved twice before she spat out a few stiff words. "You stared at me." As she spoke, she tried to shift her, but on his lap. Mo Jingshin lowered his head to look at the woman's face in his arms. His eyes were as deep as the ocean in the silent night. His soft kisses landed on her soft hair. "We haven't seen each other for more than a month. If you move around again, it won't be as simple as hurting you. Dash. Chapter 228. Now that he had said this, if she continued to move on his lap, she would be an idiot. Seeing that she had become obedient, Jingxin rubbed her hair as though he was in a good mood. You've already vented your anger. You've also said that you won't fight anymore. Now, does that hedgehog heart of yours that has its thorns removed feel better? Jinwan did not speak. Her entire body's senses were focused on the area below her. She was clearly not moving, but why was it still becoming more and more uncomfortable? Little heartless, you still know that I'm angry at you for being heartless. Yet, you're using your drunkenness to shout so much at me. Do you think this is a competition of loudness? Does louder mean you're right? And the man's slender fingers weaved through her hair and finally landed on her shoulders. His hand gripped the back of her neck, forcing her to raise her head to look at his face. Although his voice was slightly lowered, as though he was coaxing her, his indifferent gaze made her realize that if she was not drunk and not clear-headed enough, he would most likely have pressed her down on the bed to reason with her. However, right now, Jinwan could not tell what reason he wanted to reason with her. Her head was dizzy. Aside from the man's face being particularly clear, she really could not differentiate between north, south, east, and west. However, seeing that she was currently so drunk, he did not plan on bickering with her anymore. If he got drunk, he would be able to avoid facing the storm of all kinds of persuasive words and instigation. It seemed like drinking wasn't a bad thing. When Jinwan woke up, the sky outside the window was already bright. Hangovers were truly too torturous. Yet there were so many people who liked to stay drunk all night. Every time she woke up drunk, her head would hurt like hell. She sat up and lifted the blankets to discover that she was sleeping on the bed in the condo's bedroom. Of the 2 pillows on the bed, only her side had traces of being slept on, and only her side of the blankets had been lifted. Last night, Jinwan's memories were slightly blurry. She could only vaguely remember some vague impressions. She raised her hand to rub her head and then grabbed her hair. She tried hard to recall, but could not figure out if it was a hallucination or reality. She got off the bed and opened the closet to change. She then walked out of the bedroom to look at the empty living room. Looking at the sky outside the window, it should be at least 7 o'clock. If it was just a hallucination, how on earth did she return to the apartment last night? Feng Ling knew that she didn't want to come back to live, so she couldn't take the initiative to send her here. However, if it wasn't an illusion, she would still be the only one in the apartment. The silence made her wonder if she had accidentally entered an isolated world. There was no sound at all. Jinwan was slightly hungry. She went to the kitchen to open the refrigerator and saw that it was still filled with the food that the Annie had sent over 2 days ago. She was not interested in the fruits and food inside. She took out a bottle of yogurt, closed the refrigerator door, opened the lid, and walked out expressionlessly. When he walked back to the sofa in the living room, he suddenly stopped and saw a glass cup on the coffee table. He walked over and picked up the cup. There was still half a cup of water in it. He brought it to his nose and sniffed it. It was the smell of hangover tea. She turned to look at the shirt on the sofa. It was the white shirt that the man had changed out of before he left. It looked very clean, but when she picked it up and took a careful sniff, she could still smell the scent of alcohol on it, as well as the refreshing morning scent that only Mo Jingxin had. It was Mo Jingxin's shirt. It was also the half cup of hangover tea that Mo Jingxin had fed her before she went to bed. When she turned back, she saw that there was an extra pair of indoor slippers by the door. They were gray. The Andy had previously tidied them up, but Mo Jingxin had skillfully taken them out and put them on. Another pair of pink indoor slippers was currently being worn by her feet. Some of her drunken memories resurfaced bit by bit. Jinwan abruptly turned around and walked around the apartment. Although the apartment was as quiet and empty as ever, and it was indeed too big for her to live alone, she saw that there was an extra set of men's razors and a mint-flavored bottle of aftershave in the bathroom. After walking around, Jinwan returned and sat on the sofa. She leaned back and rested her head on the back of the sofa, lost in thought. So what happened last night was real. What did she say to Mo Jingxin last night? She even seemed to have tugged on his collar and angrily scolded him. What exactly did she scold? He had left traces of himself in this apartment. Did this mean that he was really not going to hold it against her anymore? But he was not around this early in the morning. It couldn't be that she had scolded him too much last night and angered him away, right? Jean pressed her forehead, her eyes staring at the half cup of hangover tea on the coffee table. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly picked up her phone to take a look. There was no call or message. By the time Jean left the apartment, it was already past 8 o'clock. Professor Lin's daily class started at 8 o'clock. It was already late, and she did not have a time to buy breakfast. She headed straight for T University. When she rushed to the classroom, Professor Lin was in the middle of teaching. He only glanced at her and did not ask anything, indicating for her to quickly sit down. Usually, Professor Lin was very strict with these hedonistic young masters. No one was allowed to be late. If they were late more than 3 times, they could forget about staying here. However, today he did not say anything and actually allowed Jean to sit down. You were so drunk last night. I thought you would sleep the entire day, Bai Wei said softly by the side when Jean sat down. If she did not mention this, Jean would have forgotten that she went out to drink with Bai Wei last night. Afterward, she was so drunk that she almost fainted. It seemed like it was Feng Ling who came to support her. What happened after that? It couldn't be that she was caught by Mo Jingshen in the act while she was still in that bar, could it? I drank the hangover tea last night and sobered up a little. My biological clock is very punctual. I wake up when it's time. Jean did not explain further and calmly replied, Didn't Feng Ling leave with you last night? The two of you didn't return to the dormitory yesterday. Now that you're here, where's Feng Ling? Jean glanced at the seat where Feng Ling usually sat. As expected, it was empty. Could it be that Feng Ling thought that she would be with Mo Jingshen for the past 2 days and did not continue following her? I don't know. I'll give her a call in a while to ask. Jean shifted her gaze away from the seat. Her heart was slightly hesitant. However, in her impression, Feng Ling always followed through with her actions. She was also very reliable. Even if she thought that she would be at Mo Jingshen's place and did not come to class, she would at least give Jean a call or send her a message. Chapter 229. In the condo, Mo Jingshen looked at the shirt Jean had folded for him, the glass cup she had washed, and the shaver she had placed in the bathroom cabinet. The corners of his lips turned up slightly. Last night, Jean was still drunk, acting as though she had been holding it in for a month. Today, she obediently tidied up the traces he had left behind. This little woman was really becoming more and more duplicitous. Mo Jingshen tugged open the top few buttons of his shirt, glanced at the sky outside the window, and chuckled softly. At this moment, his phone received a message. He glanced at it. Nanheng, in T-City? Mo Jingshen replied with one word. In Nanheng. In that condo or somewhere else? Mo Jingshen casually replied. Condo. In less than half an hour, Nanheng drove over, directly knocking on the door and entering. Mo Jingshen looked at his travel-worn appearance. It was clear that he had driven across the province overnight. His entire person exuded a cold and dispirited aura. The moment he entered, he went inside to find water to drink. Why did you come in such a hurry? What's the matter? Mo Jingshen calmly glanced at her. After drinking a glass of water, Nanheng put down the glass in his hand, speaking, Back when Feng Ling completed a mission for 11 Base in America, she once intercepted several smuggled military vehicles belonging to the New York Mafia. Those people from the Mafia have been tracking her whereabouts for the past 2 years. My men found out that they have been making some movements in the country recently, and in the past 2 days, they have been moving toward T-City. I'm afraid Feng Ling's whereabouts have already been tracked. Mo Jingshen coldly raised his eyelids, watching him. It's all old grudges formed with 11 Base. It's related to the underground arms trade in New York and Los Angeles. Their target is Feng Ling, and it won't affect your woman. Nanheng rushed overnight. He did not sleep the entire night. His expression was dark as he coughed. But for the next few days, it's best if Feng Ling doesn't follow Jinwan. If they find out that Jinwan is close to her, it won't be a good thing. Mo Jingshan's cold brows moved slightly. The New York Mafia's vengeance has always targeted a specific person. With their abilities, they won't be able to cause trouble in the country. They won't dare to implicate more people in the country's territory. Nanning nodded. Feng Ling's matter is only related to the base mission she completed. It has nothing to do with what you did in the United States a few years ago. Keep an eye on Jinwan. I don't need your help here. I know what I'm doing. Be careful, Mo Jingshan said calmly. When the time is right, let's send those people who frequently set up obstacles in the United States to the next world. These years, they have also committed many evil deeds. When the time is right, we should personally send them on their way. After a moment of silence, Nan Heng said, "Did you return to America a few days ago?" Mo Jingshan was expressionless. He only listened and did not respond. The news I got from the front line is that the old man of the Su family is very angry with you. What about it? Did the thing that happened to Jinwan a month ago really touch your bottom line? Nan Heng's cold and seductive eyes contained a trace of mockery. I don't believe it if you say that Elder Su didn't have any agreement with your father back then. In the end, he thought that he had played a big game, but he didn't know that the manipulator behind the scenes had long been replaced by you. Back then, not only did you break off the engagement with his precious granddaughter, but you also restricted all aspects of the Su family. In the past 2 years, he was also very dumbfounded. Even if the Su family's influence is widespread in the United States, they clearly do not intend to openly clash with you. I'm curious, what exactly did you do in America last month? That night, Elder Su was sent to the emergency room in a fit of anger. Thankfully, his life is very tough, and he returned after staying in the hospital for 4 days. But recently, the Su family seems to be closing the country to guard against death. Are you really going to kill his precious granddaughter to avenge Jinwan? Mo Jingshan's smile was calm, as though the manipulator behind the scenes, like an executioner that Nan Heng spoke of, was not him. His tone was calm. I didn't do anything. I only let him see the pros and cons of the entire matter. If he plans to play a joke with the fate of the entire Su family, I naturally don't mind playing a joke with him. Nan Heng raised his brows. He turned to look at the slightly empty apartment. It was clear that no one came here often. He chuckled. It's already been so long. Don't tell me that Jinwan is still angry? Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold. You can scram now. Nan Heng glanced at the time. Right now was indeed not a good time to tease his brother. He had driven here through the night. Time was too tight. Mo Jingshan was an expert who did not shed a single drop of blood. From the beginning until now, aside from the fiancé who had only existed for a year due to Mo Xiao's interference, he had not missed a single step. For him, perhaps only Jinwan, who had entered his life from the beginning and gradually rampaged in his life, was the only accident. Downstairs, several security guards on duty stood ramrod straight in front of the apartment. Nan Heng walked over, took out his phone, and showed them a photo of a single person. This short-haired, tall, and skinny woman often comes and goes here. After last night, have you seen her? When a security guard saw the photo, they immediately recognized her as the person who often accompanied Miss G in and out of this apartment. 2 days ago, I saw her come back with Miss G, but not yesterday. I haven't seen her the entire day. Hearing these words, Nan Heng's gaze turned cold. He took long strides, his expression cold as he walked out. The next day, Jinwan stayed at T University as usual. Yesterday, she did not receive any news from Feng Ling, nor did she pick up her calls. If it were not for the fact that Professor Lin was about to conduct a random test on this batch of students, Jinwan would have returned to the apartment last night to take a look. Previously, when Feng Ling did not live with her, Feng Ling had a very suitable residence near the apartment. It was located in a residential area that was not too crowded. After another day of classes, Jinwan called Feng Ling, but she still did not pick up. She decided to leave T University and head to the residential area where Feng Ling had stayed for a few days to take a look. For the past month or so, She had suddenly lost contact with the person who was always by her side. On one hand, Jinwan was not used to it, and on the other hand, she was worried that something had happened to Fengling. That residential area was not far from her apartment. It was only a bus stop away. Jinwan walked there and did not take a taxi. However, from this intersection to the residential area, she had to go around a row of buildings. In the middle, there was a small alley between the buildings. Fengling had once brought Jinwan through that alley. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.